Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku Shadow found her own light part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙖𝙧𝙮 from Wattpad. So let's start the video. The 2.0 of Mirror Book. Yes, this is that grinning squinting face bottle with popping cork, birthday cakes, sparkler fireworks, partying face, raising hands, light skin tone. This book will cover chapters starting from 121 and has so much more in store for y'all. Mind-blowing stuff. It was the hardest. I had to draft and redraft and redraft and redraft for the plot. I have actually several parallel verses for this story that were discontinued that it might take up all my memory. Rolling on the floor laughing, kidding, it's an exaggeration. I will mention the brief diversions when the time comes. This will cover the arcs from the first work studies onwards. EP 66 or S4 EP2, as always, updates are at 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, give or take every alternate day. For those who haven't read the first book, I suggest going back to read it first. For the meantime, after it'll be done publishing, it's also gonna undergo editing to shorten, but the story won't be removed. As long as you read the story in a sequence, you will follow the story correctly. There's no need to panic if there are some missing chapter numbers or the chapters are too short. Unless it's mentioned that the picture/art is mine, all credits go to the artist and none of them belong to me. Fire sludge villain incident. Rin manages to push the sludge off a little with the force of her fire, and Katsuki starts being able to breathe. If she continued for a little bit more with no interruptions, she might have won, but All Might stepped in with this. It would make more sense that she had potential in Hawk's Eye's Fire Sports Festival. A little change in her battle against Shoto, not too much. The result is the same. Fire final exams arc. In her training with others at Momo's estate, she helps Momo with her self-esteem, and the exam Todoroki and Yaoyorozu vs. Eraserhead turns out differently and ends faster because of it. Till now, those are the only changes I've decided on, even if I haven't published yet. If there are any other changes, I'll mention it at the A/N at the end of the chapters 1 publish. I hope y'all will love this book just as much, and if you'll be reading this, then that means you finished the first book. So again, thanks for sticking around. Hugging face. https://open spotify.com/playlist/1LTLX6RQ8 3win36v5WF SI equals 630C77764 in the comments too. If you can't click on this link, some important ones below. Jonah Kagan, We Are the One, Doberman, Infinity Pink Flamingo, Merce Heatwaves, Glass Animals, I Got You, BB Rexa Firefly, Jeremy Zucker, We Have Each Other, Alec Benjamin Hiding in the Blue, The Fat Rat Setting Fires, The Chainsmokers Altitude, Dabinfengel, Tinlet, Real Die For You, Valorant Fallen Angel, Mars Rocket Science, Voltmalun Big Flow, and Amp. Ollie Digny William Black, Never Gonna Regret In My Head, Vervcat How Villains Are Made, Madeline Duke, Glimpse of Us, Joji Bottom of the Deep Blue Sea, Miss Army, Bizomorphline, Well Started Over T. It was Homeroom PRD. Just yesterday we had the interview with Mr. Takuda, and Izu told me later on what exactly he had come for. He turned out to be a good person. About the hero work studies that are like a more serious version of the internships, where you go to where pro heroes work and help them. We talked about them at our faculty meeting yesterday, and almost all the teachers, including the principal, thought you shouldn't do them, Mr. Aizawa said, dropping a bomb. What? All of us shouted. How can they just say no like that? Isn't gaining experience really important? I said. After we had that big meeting about it? Kirishima, but thinking about why we ended up in the dorms, I guess that makes sense, Kaminari said while fiddling with Ojiro's tail. Screw understanding why they made this decision, it wasn't fair. I worked so hard the past week. Ever since I found out about the internships, I was at 500 kilometers per hour now. Even though I should normally work hard like this, I had kept thinking about work study the entire time while working hard. It's hard to erase all that. It's hardly fair. Katsuki hit the table and stood up with a super happy expression. Serves you right? I think you should just shut up, I said straight away, in a bad mood. Just because you probably wouldn't be able to participate, Toru, though he was too happy to react. But some think we won't be able to raise strong heroes with our current policies. Mr. 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮, just flip the table and say there was a last-minute change of decision like always Mr. Izuku, please. So, we came to the decision that first years will only be allowed to go to agencies with a good track record of accepting work-study students. Katsuki froze and a nerve popped on his forehead as I grinned. Yes, imminent. He shouted, slamming his table again. I have to ask Hawks about the work studies, whether I'll be scouted or should I reach out. Izu said he was planning on asking Sir Night-Eye when we talked during dinner yesterday. Although he's a good option, he's really a bit too scary. Izu also went to All Might during lunch. And not too long after there was an announcement of All Might asking for Togata. I turned to Shoto. Oh right, I was gonna say that. Remember the other person I said that knew about us? He nodded while slurping some noodles. Why do I find that cute all of a sudden? It's well, Hawks, I had forgotten that his feather was in the room when I talked to Izu about it. He dropped in a congrats. I squinted my eyes. I want to go for the work studies, but I don't want to think about the annoying teasing that'll come with the package. Shoto's caller ID should never see the light of day. In fact, I did add hearts too, or I won't live through it at all. It's a survival instinct. Does it matter if he knows? You do not know him at all. I won't live through the work studies with him teasing me about it or asking stuff because I was about to say he likes Endeavor, but that was probably not right to say that. He wanted to ask you for the internships, but he figured you'd probably choose Endeavor, and so he sent for me and Tokoyami instead. I finished. It wasn't a complete lie, except he wanted Shoto also because of his father. Shoto believed it, so I sighed internally in relief. The next day was the weekend. Shoto and Katsuki were going for their provisional licenses, so I was seeing them off at the door. Izu was due to leave too a little later to apply for his work study. Bye. All the best and don't fight, work well together like usual, alright. I shouted with my hand beside my mouth and waving widely with the other from the porch. Shoto waved back and Katsuki just yelled without turning back, shut up. Work together? With him? When did we ever work together? I hadn't exactly said that hoping they'd work together. I said it on purpose to annoy Katsuki. But considering Shoto's character, he'll probably take it seriously and would annoy Katsuki even more. It's a bit hilarious to think about the scene, Katsuki getting weirded out. Oh well, never mind. They talked about something as they walked away. Suddenly there was a rush of wind as Izu went past with his quirk to go to Sir Night-Eye agency with a quick, "Bye Rin." Bye. I waved softly as the wind brushed my hair and made it messy real fast. I stepped back inside while combing my hair with my flames, with Katsuki's shouting following last. Walk behind me, in it. Kaminari and Grapes were standing in front of the table Kirishima and Tokoyami were sitting at. We're having a study session with Yamamoto today. You guys wanna come? Kaminari asked Kirishima and Tokoyami as I got closer. Sorry, we're busy today, Kirishima said. I was joining anyways, so it didn't matter if I answered. What side dishes should I have today? Grapes asked absent-mindedly. Everyone's got their lifestyles, Kaminari commented. I went back up to my room, thinking of spending my time online, surfing and doing research since I had nothing to do till the group study session. I sat on my bed with my laptop on a pillow on my lap. Somewhere in the middle Kyoka and Pinky popped in and we just talked about random stuff. Along with them pestering me about Shoto again when the conversation ran dry. I don't even know. Izu had returned in the late afternoon, almost nearing evening. He entered with a solemn look. Did something happen? Did he say no? I asked worriedly. It's not that. Actually, I got in, it's just I'll tell you later. It's about, I nodded with pursed lips, having understood. What was it about OFA that made Izu so serious and nervous despite having been accepted for his work study? Did Night-Eye know something about it? Congrats on getting in though. Thanks, Izu nodded with a smile. Let's just go to my room, I'll explain everything. He said, sounding all secretive. I nodded. So what's up? I was turned the other way while he got changed into casual clothes and then swiveled to face him, sitting on his study chair with one leg folded up. He explained about All Might's and Sir Night-Eye's estranged relationship, his unknown and surprising obsession with humor, and All Might, as fanatic as Izu. He even had the All Might poster that wasn't on sale, Izu said brightly. That's really surprising. He really is a huge fan, I said. He even had that poster, though. Izu also told that the hero had let him join to convince him to give up OFA to Togata. I admit, Togata does seem like a suitable successor. Izu was even more downtrodden. I quickly added, but I would never think of anyone better than you, Izu. I don't know why All Might wanted to keep it a secret from you, but I'm sure he had his reasons. And it doesn't change the fact that he had probably fought with Sir Night Eye, his beloved sidekick, for you and chose you first. He considers you worthy. I'm sure everything will be crystal clear after you talk to All Might, whenever you're willing to do it, I said, holding Izu's hand with a smile. He looked up at me with pressed lips. He probably thinks that All Might went through so much for him. He didn't deserve it, but that's not true. No matter what, Night Eye can't have you give up, not after all these scars, not after everything you've gone through to make your dream come true. I think that even if Togata knew the truth that you were All Might's successor over him, he wouldn't ever hold a grudge against you, as long as he got to know you more. So don't feel too bad about it, alright? But I had a feeling about why All Might didn't tell Izu. It's something he knew that would hurt him. After recalling the sports festival, I had an idea. It was not surprising, and yet it was heartbreaking at the same time. It was all I could do to keep my face straight and not let my true feelings show. I will be with Izu on the decision that he will make after getting to know the truth. Izu smiled with tears and hugged me. Thank you, Rin. I smiled softly and hugged him back. I say it because I believe it, it's weighing on him a lot. By the time me and Izu came down, even Shoto and Katsuki were back. Hey, you two. How was your class? I asked cheerily. Hey, Todoroki. Kaken. Izu said from beside me. Don't remind me that I'm behind you doing it. Katsuki shouted while going past us. Izu smiled awkwardly and stepped away. I'll go, I have to tell the others too, Izu said, going away. Tell what? Shoto asked me, looking down. I looked back at him from Izu's leaving figure. Well, he got his work study at Night Eye's agency, I said, wondering if he'll feel bad again and would mention catching up with us. That's good. I stared for a bit. He seemed fine. I smiled. So, how was the class? It was a bit tough, but it's okay. We still haven't started the practical lessons yet. They talked about all our weak points and all the places we had to improve. There were 8 other students with us. I hummed. Well, it also makes sense. It was just the first day after all. Though he seemed like something was bothering him, it was very slight, not that important, but it was there. Did something happen while you were there? I sighed with a small, helpless smile. You and Yurashi didn't get into another fight, did you? It was the only reason I could think of that made him upset. He looked to the upper right corner of his eye with a slight blush that was almost guilty and avoided my eyes. Seriously, what happened? I asked. Till things settle with whatever Yurashi's feelings was towards the Todoroki family and endeavor, they couldn't completely see eye to eye. It's actually more surprising if things were good between them. He looked down with his hair spilling lightly. I wanted to move it so it doesn't cover his face. My face flushed slightly at the thought. He looked so cute when he normally just had a calm poker face, but that cuteness just somehow intensifies when he wasn't emotionless. It was mostly because I got angry, he said, still revealing everything. My eyebrows furrowed a bit in confusion. What about you? Well, Yuji finally admitted. I was completely caught off guard. Me? I blinked, dumbfounded. He rubbed the back of his head. He talked about how he liked your fiery eyes when you scolded us during the provisional licensing exam without caring if he was a stranger or not, and the passion in your voice wanting to prevent our fight before it started, as if you read our minds, and how you care about your friends, things like that. I got angry. He didn't know that we liked each other since it didn't look like it back then. Bakugo stepped in. He said, though it looked like he didn't regret it at all. Did he say anything more than that? He sounded a little smitten, Shoto said almost defensively. Oh God, I don't care about the rest, but him getting defensive like this, I might need to check my cardio one day. Now that I had a slight picture, I could imagine exactly how Katsuki butted in. Probably something like a casual mention. It was surprising what Yurashi said, but that didn't matter to me. And yet again, like last time, imagining the angry look on his face due to jealousy created warm butterflies in my heart. Is this good? I smiled and giggled. Forget about it. He's the kind of person who'd exaggerate everything he says with a big grin. does not mean that he really meant it, that he liked me as a girl. I said with shining eyes. It was a bit amusing, but at least they didn't get into a fist fight because Katsuki helped. I should probably thank him later. Shoto seemed a little disappointed nevertheless for some other reason. It was subtle, not completely noticeable. I looked at him puzzled. Something wrong? He looked away. No, nothing. It's definitely something. What else would he be disappointed about? I racked my brain and remembered with an oh and a slight blush. I stood up and kissed his cheek. Is this fine? I repeated helplessly and added, looking away, and you don't have to pretend to be jealous on purpose for this another time. Apparently, it was not the right place. Man, I wish I had a girlfriend like that. I hear Kaminari, who passed by with his hands folded behind his head, walking by us with his eyes closed and a bummer expression on his face as I yelped. Some of our other classmates passed by us too. Kaminari. Kirishima harshly whispered to the said boy following him too. Shiro and Ojiro had awkward smiles and Ojiro raised his hand with an apology in our direction. The air is filled with a lot of cupids and roses though, Shiro said. They were in their world. It's rude to intrude like this, Kaminari. We really should have gone from the other side, Tokoyami said, looking at Kaminari and then at us. We apologize, and on behalf of Kaminari as well. You initial wording does not help. After they left, I let go and buried my face in my hands immediately. Why does this keep happening? My face was beet red and fuming. Sorry, Shoto said from behind me, remembering how I'm usually uncomfortable with all this teasing. What happened earlier should probably count as teasing. It's fine, I interrupted, looking up straight ahead. We'll just have to get used to it. Yeah, after all we live in the same house. I made a difficult expression again, pursing my lips. Deal with it. All this teasing is really overwhelming, not in a bad way, but overwhelming nonetheless. I have to really get used to it fast or they won't stop. Shoto said again with his hand hovering about to reach out and a slightly guilty look. It's okay really. Just go and forget about it, I'll do that too. And you really don't have to apologize. I said, taking his hand and then pushing him towards the elevator. We should just be careful of people from now on. Okay, he said, looking at me as I pushed him in and then headed to the living room, reaching just after the boys who passed by us earlier. But man, you're really amazing, Midoriya, Kaminari said, still walking with his hands behind his head. The rest of the boys came too and Tokoyami leaned against the wall. Talking about work studies, to be honest, me and Tokoyami could be said to be the first ones to score the work study, but the news just hadn't come yet. He's definitely gonna be surprised. Yeah, I mean you'll be at Sir Naitai's agency? Shiro, you were recommended by Togata. Good job. Kirishima. Izu scratched his cheek with a sort of sad expression. After few moments, I heard Shoto behind me. The distance between us has widened again. We need to catch up as soon as possible. That was fast. Katsuki angrily clicked his tongue. The school said Gunhead hasn't had enough interns, so I can't go there. Yura said with her head resting on her hands sadly. Same here, I wanted to go to Selki's but Tsukurashima, who was hanging on the backrest of the sofa, sulked as well. Fourth kind doesn't even take work studies. I mean, the threshold's been set pretty high, Shiroya. We can only ask pros with a good track records who'll take work study students. Kaminari, it can't be helped. Unlike the internships, we'll be directly involved. So if anything happens Ojiro said and was interrupted. It becomes a problem of who's responsible on the pros side. Mr. Aizawa said, coming in. Mr. Aizawa. Kirishima, pros who'll accept students even after knowing the risks are the real thing. He said and turned to me and Tokoyami. Rin, Tokoyami, you've both gotten an invitation for a work study from one of those real pros? I smiled. It's from Hawks, who works in Kyushu. I didn't know Aizawa was thinking, so she already knew Hawks. Kaminari ranked third in the hero ranking. Shiro, everyone cheered. I'd contacted Hawks for the work studies. He said that he would be sending invitations anyway, without needing to ask for either of us, but I waited as a surprise till you got the news to tell you. Sorry I did it without asking or informing. Oh no, it's fine, you could say you surely succeeded at surprising me. You kept in touch with him? Kaminari asked. I just asked about the work study, I said puzzledly. I guess that means you accept, Mr. Aizawa said, looking at me as I nodded. What will you do, Tokoyami? Mr. Izawa asked, looking at the avian. He stood up straight and nodded. I respectfully accept. Very well. I'll give you the work-study paperwork later. You should have informed me first, Rin. Mr. Izawa said, looking at me as I flinched apologetically. Let me know when you figure out when you'll both be going to Kyushu. I'll authorize your absences for those days. Isn't that great, Tokoyami? Shoji spoke through a tentacle. I nodded with a bright smile. I am most humbly pleased, Tokoyami said. We need to catch up as soon as possible. Shoto said again, lowering his head with folded arms, and Katsuki shouted, Stop saying that. Mr. Izawa informed Kirishima, Tsu and Yura that Amajiki and Hado were looking for them. They speculated if it was work studies. While not wanting to get their hopes up but being unable to wait, they left immediately. We need to catch up as Shoto started as Katsuki shouted, even more annoyed, Shut up. Yurika and the others sure are lucky. Kaminari, let's do our best too. Zero who care about work studies. Even if first years like us go, we'll just be made to run errands and stuff. Disgusting grapes, said, staring at Mina's chest as I frowned. That was what happened at your internship, right? Kaminari pointed at him. Don't remind me of my dark past. Grapes said, messing with his hair and a traumatized expression. All of us laughed at that. It kinda served him right back then for tricking us into wearing those fishy uniforms. Hey Tokoyami, let's finish the paperwork tomorrow morning and go to the agency. I asked. Sure thing, he said, nodding. Shoto started again. Just shut the F up, Yubizu. Katsuki. The next day me and Tokoyami took a day off from school to fill the paperwork for the work studies, go to Kyushu to get it signed and discuss the workdays. We rode the train there and finally arrived at the agency on the more than familiar route, seeing Horace and Parawave first thing. Ah hey, Tsukuyami, Pyro, here for the work studies? Parawave asked, waving with an enthusiastic air while walking up to us. Yes, it's a pleasure to meet and work with you again, Tokoyami up. We're gonna be working together properly this time, I said, and there was a yay from Horace with high fives from both of them, high and low, and I returned it with equal enthuse. Tokoyami also got pulled into it, but with a simple high five. He needs to lighten up. He looked like a bird caught in airplane headlights. That's great. Hawks told me to get you two up to his office when you arrived. I was actually waiting for you. Parawave said as we followed him, already making ourselves at home while saying bye to Horace. How has school been? I heard you guys were attacked by the League again, Parawave said as we entered the lift. You guys must have had it hard, and with your classmate kidnapped. Sorry, that must have been rude. No, it's all right. It's in the past. I waved my hand. Yes, please don't think that way. The League's somehow always looming over us like shadows. We managed to scrape through it somehow, and I'm grateful we're all back together again. Tokoyami, well, we've both grown stronger since then. I hope I'll get to catch up with Hawks this time at least. You guys really work hard. I'll be rooting for that to happen as well, he said, opening the door. Hawks had jumped up from his seat on the couch and landed in front of us with his wings in a flutter. Hey, you two. So glad to see you out of those protective cages again. Let's get this over with, shall we? He said brightly with a grin, spreading his wings in the wide span. I could see his excitement so evidently, especially with him flapping his wings out like that. It's been quite some time since we met in person because of the dorms when we usually meet so often. It was kind of like seeing a Labrador run around you when you return home. I was happy to see him again too, though I kept a more normally excited smile, and Hawk's smiles were a mystery itself anyways. We're glad to be out too, I said with a bright smile as our eyes met once in between. But even if we met, we couldn't talk freely. We called and texted a few times but had only spoken briefly. I could not tell him about the toga thing yet. Whatever, I could just tell him during the work study now that I could keep his normal pace. Then again, I couldn't if he truly went all out against me. He sat at his usual couch and stamped the contract, seeming like he barely looked through it, but he was just that fast, and flew the 2 sheets to us in barely an instant. Here you go. So, when are we going to come for work? I asked. We'll text you the dates later on, but there might be some staggering with your 2 skeds once in a while. You don't mind, right? Hawks said with a close-eyed smile and head perched sideways on his hand. Tokoyami paused for a moment, so I stayed silent too and then nodded with him. No, of course not, I'm only grateful for having been accepted for the work study. Thank you for the opportunity again. I will work hard and prove worthy. Tokoyami said, bowing 90°. Why yeah, thank you, me too. I said, bowing too. This is even better. Not that I don't want Tokoyami to be there or anything, but I could talk to Hawks freely when I'm briefly here. And it's not as if only I get to work alone with Hawks, it's the same for Tokoyami too. We both could slowly work on looking like we gained a closer friendship over time like we already are. Alright, stop with the formalities you two. Rule number 1 for work studies, no more bowing, alright? It's nice and polite but kinda makes me feel awkward now that this'll be more permanent. How about we have our first day tomorrow? He asked brightly, nevertheless secretly enjoying the sincere thank you from me. It's not that I didn't want to thank him, but his smugness made it a matter of pride. We weren't at the polite stage at all, way past it in fact since day one. Although it pleasantly reminded me of the first time we met, except when I thought he won't ever see polite from me, never thought things would end up like this. On another note, Tokoyami and I have contrasting quirks. In some cases I could even protect the darkness for him by dealing with extinguishing flames, but during other times it'd be troublesome to actively use our quirks side by side to full potential. So, this system of work schedule depending on the agency's requirements was wise. Especially since we'd be working this time round instead of just following and watching while doing nothing. At least I hope we'll be working with this bird around. Time to get her in, huh? Well, it all started with them. The Hero Public Safety Commission. They sound really virtuous, but in fact they're not. At least not completely. They might have abolished the secret agent system after the incident with the previous president. But they can't exactly not have such a useful system eradicated completely, and that's why they pulled me in from a very young age and cut all my ties. However, it was kinda disappointing. And there's nothing to find out. Although she did relatively well for her level, and her quirk in its own abilities is very strong, her technique and strength was really weak, really weak, not to mention a very frail girl. A gust of wind could blow her away. I finally see this is what they mean by people looking different on screen and real life. This might take hard work, or that's what I thought. I had my feathers trail her. I found out many interesting things. All Might. I never saw him, but I could hear his voice through the feathers every so often, or her talking with her brother on the beach. Did Prez know this? It was nothing much. I could barely decipher what they're saying since my feathers were a little far, but it wasn't hard to guess. That boy seemed to be his successor. They must have met through that sludge incident. She started training on her own, just basic exercises to improve her strength, but not much combat training or quirk enhancement. It was a flea compared to the training I got at that age. But she tried hard. Pushing her limits was what she was good at, and she could improve fast from just 20 minutes of jogging to an hour. There was talent and aptitude. It was also my job, along with training her, to observe and report on her stats and actual potential. Finally, it's her. Just like a normal fan, that was her reaction. She stumbles easily over her words when she's nervous, but calm when the situation calls for it, consciously not crossing the line. Though she warmed up pretty fast from an excited 3-year-old cliché fan to a cheeky teenager, fitting my tempo and not being awkward in any way like it was the first time. I made the training hard, but there was absolutely no complaint. No matter how much I amped up the difficulty, tested her, and she even got several bruises and some BLD too all at once. It took me by surprise. How could she not whine or throw a tantrum or quit? And she pushed herself to do more than what I gave her. She wasn't no normal kind of middle schooler despite not being used to such hardship. It grew on me a little. In 10 months of training there was tons of improvement. Her goal was not too different. She wanted to protect her brother. It was just a smaller version. Although from what I knew, Izuku Midoriya had no quirk, but he suddenly got one right before the entrance exam. It wasn't impossible, but it wasn't common to be such a late bloomer. It made more sense after knowing his body couldn't handle his quirk. Maybe all that training prepared him to be able to use the quirk that was just dormant till then. And before I knew it, we had gotten closer than I would have thought. She was just a job. But despite the forced stubbornness, it almost cured a deep-seated loneliness that I never knew I had felt. But it was not completely quenched. It made no difference because I wore a mask and gloves in front of her, fake skin and layers on my heart. Underneath it was BLD and betrayal, everything that made a spy and a voluntary puppet. Before I knew it, I had bought a gift that consisted of fireproof clothes for her exam of my own accord. When did I care so much? When she gets to know the truth, everything will crumble. It's not only about training her because she was just a job, but the truth also becomes harsher the longer it's hidden, and the longer lies are told. It scared me sometimes, the fact that I might suddenly see a sense of betrayal in those eyes. Who cares? I shouldn't care at all. She was a mission and an assignment, nothing more. Betrayal and backstabbing were as simple as mealtime for a spy. I tried to convince myself like that. I sapped first-hand information about the League's involvement with 𝙎𝙬𝙢𝙢𝙬. I couldn't be worried when I found out about the USJ incident. I played it cool like I would, and like I should. There's no future for a spy with a weakness. She confided easily in me, trusted me completely with everything that wasn't someone else's secret, like she would tell me anything. I never knew that sometimes trust was that painful. Casual hangouts every time after. Training, conversations, teasing and laughter, and bets. I might miss all of these, but I've also learned to be able to kill such feelings of attachment if required. Then when she said that she had felt someone following her and that it happened once before, there was a bit of worry inside me. I ended up sending a feather to her. After all, the HPSC wouldn't want their possible reserve candidate getting kidnapped by any villain or put in danger, right? Who would follow her specifically? There seemed to be some kind of mystery shrouding her when, on the other hand, her brother was different and more normal. They were twins, and yet something separated them so starkly. Later was her hero name that she said she chose after my nickname for her. How long and how far was this gonna go? I couldn't stop her or try to freeze our relationship without being suspicious, but the unease at getting closer to her was just like digging a pit. The deeper the pit is, the more it hurts after you fall. Then there was the internship. She was gonna see the side of me during work, but it was a good thing. Slowly, since she was perceptive enough, she would see part of who I was truly. I didn't hide any of it. I didn't have a particular reason to bring Tsukuyami in. The 50% about the League was a complete bluff. He interested me a little, sure, but it's better for her to see that she shouldn't be hurt when the time comes. It's a normal thing for me, being random was. It hurt a bit of my pride that she wasn't jealous at all. She's weird. She only watched on as if it wasn't related to her and as if I had my reasons for behaving like that. Even if she was curious about the illogical reason for choosing Tokoyami, she only asked about the remaining 30%. As if my strange attitude wasn't anything to find weird or questionable. During the Hosu incident, the first thing she did was call me while having a panic attack. Not to ask for help, but to calm herself down instead and find a bit of support. Before I knew it, I was out of my balcony window and on my way to her hotel room before her condition could get worse. I brought her to the tower I usually went to sit. It was the highest point in the city. It seemed to have worked on her nerves, which made me happy. She was not very different from a bird either. She enjoyed flight and wasn't afraid of heights, and it calmed her down when she was troubled. I remember how frightened she was at flying in the beginning. It was just like a little chick learning to use her wings but afraid of falling. I was confounded. She was a sheltered girl with no troubles. You could almost call her spoiled, but she recognized something like that just after 2 days, almost without any effort. What sort of instincts and level of understanding did she have? I didn't answer, and thankfully she forgot about it. But it was a question that would trouble me for a few days. I thought I knew her, but I guess I didn't. And she was clever with regards to emotions and people. After calming down, she startlingly analyzed the situation at Hosu with the little information she had, logically guessing all the effects and outcomes and coming to an almost definitive conclusion. As for that information, she couldn't have had it if she wasn't naturally observant. When it came to people, conspiracies, or politics, she was so good at it that it was almost dangerous, but it was useful for others if she had a good heart. Even if I was apprehensive of her potential, she could even be someone as good as me. It was only something trepid, not something great. Another incident was when I had called her to give her the invites for the iExpo. There was no need for me to go. I wasn't interested in playing hero diplomat for everyone, so it's better to just give them to Rin. That was when she finally revealed about All Might. It was nothing new, but it was also one of the possibilities I had in mind why the Prez asked me to train her because of her connection to All Might's possible successor. But it seems from what Rin said, there was no way for the Prez to know, and that option was unfortunately ruled out. She was being understanding again, but why now? Did All Might and her brothers say it was all right to tell me? That means they know that I train her. She could tell me all these secrets, but she hasn't told anyone else except her brother about us. I just don't get her sometimes. She definitely knows that this truth isn't something small. The identity of All Might's successor is dangerous information. But I expected her to deny it, at least embarrassingly, but she only smiled helplessly, not doing anything about what I said, which had me taken aback. She reacts in the strangest ways. I was reminded of how people sometimes complain about not knowing what I'm thinking. The universe was definitely laughing at me by throwing the same situation at me. But it's probably all my influence. It isn't that bad in that case. I thought smugly. What about her? She paused. She didn't seem to have anything in particular to say about it. Did I overestimate her? I deflated a bit when she spoke again. That made me happy. Being mysterious is all I am, she continued. Oh, so she found out that much at least. No, why am I thinking it's a given? Nobody should know I have layers or whatever. That means I'm failing at my job, but I don't even feel any failure. Maybe because it's her. So even if I don't know your reasons, I think you believe in him, even if just a little. But for whatever reason, you don't want to show it to him. In any case, whatever you let everyone see, I think, no, I believe that deep down you never have any bad intentions, no matter what it is. It's as if she saw right through me. And as if she would even accept if she learned the truth about everything. It gave me a bit of hope that I wanted to push away. She hadn't seen anything about me yet. Even if I'd like to think it's false hope, I wish you would stick to this. After a training camp incident when her childhood friend Katsuki Bakugo was kidnapped, I couldn't reach her phone. I didn't know whether she was not responding to my calls because she was unconscious or because she was in despair about her friend. All I knew was that she was alive. Either way, I was worried and anxious. I never felt this anxious about anyone before. Just staring at the phone and then throwing my head up while holding it and yelling in frustration at the 30th call being ignored. She finally answered her texts and I jumped at the phone and held it high up, shouting, "Finally!" I couldn't help but want to go see her in person to confirm if she was okay, not to get to know about the league but to truly find out if she was okay. My true intentions towards her had long changed, but I kept it buried. And after that incident, I realized that she wasn't just a mission anymore. She gave me a shock when I found that she had gone to rescue Bakugo. I hadn't heard it from her but the DMN who reprimanded me for not keeping an eye on her. No one gave me such a fright with their reckless frequent encounters with villains. She might be exposed if she met the league too much. Fortunately or unfortunately, this time she hadn't revealed her presence. Until she knows the truth about herself, she wouldn't need to work under the HPSC. That day I also got my assignment to infiltrate the league. She could be strong enough after another few courses from the HPSC. I knew that if I told her she'd want to join, even if it's because of her personal desperate curiosity, she would be more willing since it would mean protecting her brother and her friends. She's that determined. But I didn't want that for her. I didn't want this life for her. Even if we were there for each other, it still means she'll face that side of the darkness. She shouldn't be allowed to in the first place. If need be, I'll take on more of the burden myself. I won't be a hero who'd want to buy more time for the other heroes if I let the one person I care about in on this mission and ruin her innocent view of the world. She may not be completely naive and ignorant. She is more mature than anyone else her age despite not having faced the harsh truths of the world, but her hands are still clean. Applying black on an already black canvas wouldn't make a difference, so I'll carry it for as long as I can. Exactly how long this secret will last. Forever would be a good thing. Even Hawks was amused by the improvement. Oh, he was doing a much better job of catching up with his new move, Dark Fallen Angel. I smiled with excitement. This was such a pleasant surprise. I cheered for Tokoyami with my hands on my mouth while flying backwards with a wide grin. That's awesome, Tsukuyami. Look at the dumbstruck bird. I shouted cheekily while waving to lighten the mood at Tokoyami, who had been gritting his teeth hard in burning determination. Tokoyami momentarily got out of that angry-looking mood and sweat dropped at my speaking for Hawks and calling him by dumbstruck bird. Hawks pretended to go along with it and made a shocked while shutting his mouth expression and nodded frantically. See? That certainly got Tokoyami and Parawave and Horus to sweat drop in sync. You're supposed to be laughing. Come on and touch the skies with us, I said with a grin, and Tokoyami looked at me for a moment in surprise and then smiled. Yeah, I'm gonna catch up to you too. Watch out. It worked. He should have some fun along with being that serious. I really feel like the middleman here. It's awkward when the mood between them gets that way and I'm right there while knowing what's happening. I know I am, I said. I had improved as well. But even if I could keep up with Hawks, he never let me fight a single villain and finished the work instantly. No matter how hard I pushed, there was still a 100 km/h gap and he was flying in the range of 500 to 600. Once I nearly caught a villain and he butted in again. I had to hold it in. I can't just start complaining like a baby. To the others it seemed like I was simply too slow and Hawks was trying to push me to get better, but I knew that wasn't the case. Because 1 was fine, 2 was a coincidence, but 3, 4, and 5. Just what was he trying to do? It was frustrating me. Tokoyami. That flying was amazing. When did you figure that out? I asked as we took a break while Parawave and Horus dealt with the police with Hawks. From that conversation in the common room about your flying, he said. I owed in response, remembering. He did say float. With me fumigage, soon you will float too. Dark Shadow said with a thumbs up and Tokoyami nodded. Alright, another one on the south side of town near the shopping center. See you all there, Hawks said flying up, and we all followed. The day was over and it was already night. All of us left the office with a good work today. But before we went too far, Hawks spoke up. Tokoyami, do you have a minute? He waved a hand over. We turned back. What do you want me to talk about now? Tokoyami asked. In a way, I think Tokoyami sometimes does seem pissed at Hawks. More like silent anger. The things he has to go through, it's not about that. And you can go pyro by. He said with a cheeky smile and a wave. I narrowed my eyes in an almost glare from behind the unaware Tokoyami, saying silently, we still have to have a talk about what you did today. If he understood what I meant, he didn't show it. Tokoyami turned back feeling something strange, but my expression was normal. I'll wait for you in the lobby, Tokoyami, I said and received a nod. Whatever that was about, apparently I wasn't needed. Horus kept me company in the lobby too since he had to SRT me and Tokoyami to the train station. He leaned back on the couch with his arms folded behind his head. I thought you'd ask why Hawks held Tsukuyomi back. Do you know why? I asked. No, he said awkwardly. Okay, I'll have to admit I was wondering if you knew. He grinned slightly. It's hard to figure out what Hawks is thinking, so it's better not to ask, I said. There was a bit of sadness and disappointment in my tone that I could not hide. I couldn't help but think of what happened today. Why did he not want me to fight? What reason could he have? I just don't get it. Was it because I would be having my debut and I shouldn't be getting too famous just yet? But that was so ridiculous. Whatever it was, it still hurt a little. I don't know what you're talking about, but if you're working with Hawks you tend to get used to that character of his. He has always been like that, so none of us can guess his true intentions till we got the end result, Horus said. I nodded with a small smile. There's no need to worry others over such a small thing. I had to ask Hawks myself. Is something both there in you? You seem a lot more pensive than usual. You can talk, even though I'm talkative, I don't rant. I let out a small laugh. Did I? It's nothing. I've just been thinking about today and not being able to do anything despite improving the way I did. The gap's still pretty huge. Really? I thought you were sad about being left out or something, he sighed in relief. Huh? You young'uns of this gen are really proactive and energetic, aren't you? He chuckled lightly. That's not something I'd worry about. But thanks, I said with a smile, feeling slightly better. But with the dorms at you, and not being able to really meet and Hawks being busy most of the time, slowly made it feel like we were growing apart and couldn't talk much about anything anymore. It was a little hard for me to accept that after 1 year of being really close. Not to mention that ever since I've stepped into the world of his work, there has been an uneasy feeling inside me. I couldn't understand him very much anymore. Just how much was he hiding and how much was the truth? What was he thinking? We chatted for some time about Tokoyami's surprising new move and everything that happened today. It's usually rare Horace dropped us off since he usually left early and it was always Parawave. Not that he didn't like us, but the latter pushed him to SERT us at least once because he's been escaping it too much and that Parawave deserved to leave early for once. The wait didn't feel too long because of us talking. After about 25 minutes 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙖𝙧𝙮 came back. He seemed a bit refreshed but also unsettled in a good way. Like he finally found some closure. He had gone back to normal after seeing us and walking closer. His feathers seemed ruffled. I apologize for keeping you waiting for me. We can depart for the train station now. He bowed his head slightly. What happened? Why did Hawks keep you back? I asked as we sat on the train later. He took me flying and talked about stuff he said, probably still processing it. It was obvious that the slight hate he always had till now vanished and I was happy about it. How was it? I asked with a smile. It felt like I was one with the wind, right? I said brightly. The view was pretty too, right? Yes, it was appealing. By any chance? No, never mind, he said, stopping. Before he said anything. Did Hawks take her flying? What? I asked with a curious look. Nothing, he said, turning away again. He was about to say something but stopped. Was it related to what happened when you went flying? I asked with narrowed eyes and a pressurizing gaze. Why did he have to stop himself from saying it? What did you guys talk about? I asked. Hawks didn't say anything, right? I smiled. Don't be shy. 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮 tried to lean away from saying anything with a sweat drop, but I wasn't backing away. Or did he say something fishy? Please don't force me. I apologize, Rin, but I'm not permitted to tell you about our conversation, 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮 finally blurted out. I stood up straight with an incredulous look and slowly my face turned angry for a moment with a scary aura. I can already imagine what that bird said with a wink. Are you angry? 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮 asked directly. Oh no, it's not because of you. It just pisses me off when I think of his wink when he asked you to keep quiet about it. I said, clenching up a trembling fist with a nerve popped. It wasn't about the GG order. I was already in a bad mood from today. Now considering what Hawks just did, it made sense to assume that he understood my earlier glare and was playing with me right now. So he really was holding me back from fighting on purpose. He did wink. I knew it. That dash. I didn't think Hawks could make you angry, 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮 commented. You seemed to get along easily and you were never mad about him using us as mere informants? I paused for a moment. Well, I suppose if he was planning on using me, couldn't it be the other way round by using him to gauge my potential? I'd like to think of this as an opportunity. It was the same for you too, wasn't it? I smiled. You've also discovered something about yourself. You're too nice, Rind, he said finally, and I flinched. What? But dash, I could never get along with him even as a fake. But that's because our relationship was different and started differently. I felt guilty about hiding it from 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮. We just dealt with it differently. You bared with him silently till today. I'd say you're way stronger, 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮, and it isn't bad to hold resentment sometimes. Hawks deserved it anyways for being such an butt. And the difference is I don't like staying silent. In any case, I didn't think Hawks was a bad person, and I'd like to see more about a person before judging them completely, I suppose. 𝙎𝙎𝙧𝙮 sweat dropped at my cursing Hawks so casually. You humble me too much, he said a little hesitantly, hoping I never met his fan base while saying that or anything. Okay, now what were you gonna ask me earlier? Flattery won't get you any answers, aw man. The next few days were free, and we attended classes as usual. Everyone talked about Red Riot, Froppy, and Uravity's debuts. It was really amazing and I read their news online too, but I couldn't help but sulk with my head on my hand and a pout since Hawks was being my nemesis in this. Nah, he was being my arch-nemesis. It's been bothering me a lot. You weren't able to do anything during your work-study? Shoto asked, turning back to face me, and also noticed my sulkiness. Hawks is not letting me do anything. He finishes everything before I even arrive. I mean, what was the point of improving? It's like he's trying his hardest to not let me do anything and pushing his own limits along with mine. Even at that fire accident. My specialty. He rescued everyone before I could even act, and then there was no need for me anymore once the fire brigade reached and finished the work. I vented with hand gestures and buried my head in my arms on the table with a depressed aura. He probably just wants you to become stronger. Keep fighting. I'm sure you'll steal one away from him at least, Shoto said with a small smile as I looked up. I smiled in return. Well, His smiles are very suitable weapons against me but can also help me cheer up. It wasn't so bad. Meanwhile, Tokoyami, who heard me vent loud enough for him to hear from in front of Shoto, thought, so she has her problems with him too. Yesterday's curse was also personal. Her constant resistance and tolerance truly is admirable. He lowered his head silently. Why aren't you letting me fight? I asked directly. On the day it was just me in the work-study. I had waited for so long with burning curiosity, I couldn't wait another second. As soon as we were in the air. You can fight. I'll admit, you've impressed me with how you improved over the time you were at a nugget, and that's exactly why, since you're getting so close to reaching me, why don't you try taking the villain for yourself? But I won't let you win that easily, Hawks said in his lazy tone and smile while looking forward. I pursed my lips, then fine, don't cry like a baby when I take your kill, I smiled, helplessly hiding my unease. He looked back at me. Let's see if you can do it in the first place, he said, unaware. We both were in on this game to win. Hawks actually took the challenge from me happily. By the end of this work-study, I had to beat him. But it was proving to be seriously difficult. Our experiences were as far apart as the ground and sky. I only saw the elusive horizon. Even if I could more or less match his speed, I couldn't compete with him in skill. His maneuvering was mastery. The result was the same again that day. It was starting to become the internships all over again, and it was maddening. When I came back home, everyone had just started preparing dinner. After a few greetings, I went back to my room. Today, Shoto had practical lessons in the provisional license course. I wonder what happened. I went to his room after changing out of my school uniform and knocked on his door. He opened it, and as soon as he did, my heart dropped. Shoto. What happened? I shrieked. He had bandages all over his face. What sort of harsh training did they do? Rin, I also felt a bit of unreasonable anger since they had hurt Hat Face so bad. Especially with him looking so innocent while at it. How they could hurt that innocent face. But then it's him working hard to improve. I really don't know what to think of this, but it certainly pulled my heartstrings badly to see him like that. What happened? I asked, trying to stay calm and not curse those provisional license instructors and convincing myself that they were really helping them. And maybe my voice unknowingly sounded a little deep and scary. Shoto held my hand to probably help calm me down as he spoke. It worked a bit by startling me and making me blush. What he said next brought me out of the distraction. It's nothing, the training was just really harsh. There was a complicated obstacle course that included a forest and invisible traps. So I couldn't notice all of them and fell into them instead. I was dumbfounded. How hard was it that even he had to fall into the traps and get this hurt despite having an ice quirk? He seemed to have understood my confoundment as he added, we had to do it quirkless. And reflect by healing on our own without Recovery Girl's help. Gang Orca said it was the most effective way to learn, so it's supposed to stay like this for a while. That made some sense, but why healing without external help? The training was really cruel. With my hands behind my back, I stood up on my toes and quickly kissed his nose on the gauze with a smile and got back down instantly. Shoto stopped for a moment as if he didn't notice what just happened. That's for working hard. But it wouldn't exactly work like Recovery Girls, I said, a bit flushed. He turned slightly red and looked down at me. It works fine, surprisingly. I started fretting nervously. I'm pretty sure I don't have a healing quirk. I can't believe he just said that. When he learned all these pickup lines. And they work too well, but it was really fast, he said, still with a straight face. I turned around swiftly with my back facing him. Well, it's just temporary. There's still time till we're together, I said, hiding my blush. Oh goodness. I'll work hard, he said. He didn't even complain about it after I said that we still had to get together when it was just an excuse because I was a bit flustered. I can't tell if I'm relieved or disappointed. Why should this be so complicated? I smiled and put a hand to my mouth to cover the laugh. The innocent enthusiasm all through a straight face was too cute. I turned to face him and nodded with a bright smile. Let's go eat dinner. I reached out and pulled him along by his hand. It was warm and felt safe, just like that time he held them for almost the entire day. My heart couldn't help but skip a beat at the thought. It's so cliched, but I felt like it wasn't bad if this what it meant for couples to hold hands. I didn't know that the same was being resonated. For some reason though, Most of the girls hadn't noticed Katsuki's and Shoto's injuries till the next day in class. Then again, I hadn't seen Katsuki until today morning either. He was probably hiding the whole time, not wanting to look weak with those unhealed injuries. What's up with Bakugo? Was he fighting again? Pinky asked one totally plausible question, pointing with both fingers. Oh, but the girls didn't see him yet. Take a look at Todoroki too. Kaminari said, dropping his bag. It messed up his pretty face. Rin must be so sad. What happened though? Pinky shouted the second she saw Shoto's face. Stop shouting such stuff out loud, Pinky, I exclaimed while trying to hold back a blush. What made me even more defensive was that I was livid about it yesterday and she was right. Mina just smiled in my direction as Shoto looked up, hearing some of the commotion. Hee, didn't deny it, did ya? Apparently, the provisional license classes are harsh. Kaminari said with a grin from what Mina said. Must be good for jocks? Mina said, swinging her fists up and down. Stop talking about us like we're not here. Katsuki shouted, slamming his fists on his table. Ida asked about Yura and Tsu's absence when Yamamoto told him that they gave her the leaves of absence. Tokoyami and Kirishima, on the other hand, must have handed theirs to him. Kyoka also pointed out their missing selves. Tokoyami's at his work-study, I said, walking over. Kirishima too, didn't you hear? In fact, all of them found places to do their work-studies at. Siro, seriously? Hato and Amajiki from the Big Three had recruited them apparently, I said. I found out from Kirishima on one of the morning jogs. Grapes asked about Aizu's work-study, but before he could reply, Katsuki shouted while covering his ears, don't talk about stuff you're ahead of me on. So wait, Rin, don't you go to the same work-study as Tokoyami? Hawk's right? Kyoka asked me. Yeah, our schedules are staggered on some days. Although I still couldn't do much, I'm still just this close to Cat Dash. Shut you, Katsuki shouted as I laughed, knowing he would shout about it. The next few days have been pretty normal, and whenever we went to work, it was a monotonous game of tag. Although Aizu, Yura, Kirishima and Tsu have suddenly been seriously down since the weekend work-study. Me and Tokoyami were the only ones out of the loop. They couldn't tell us about it since it was related to their work-study. They were restless and eager for something, and you could find them looking at their phones oftentimes. I landed on only one conclusion, because there can't be such a coincidence. Maybe all of their agencies were teaming up on something. There was no way for all of them to be equally sad. And for that reason I couldn't ask them about it, all I could do was tell them that I was there to help. Being in two different agencies was hard since we wouldn't know when something big would go down for the other. It made me feel more and more helpless each day. 2 days after that weekend, I was called in for the work-study again, and only me this time. The allocations each week were for the most part random. As usual, it was another game of tag, and finally when the day ended, I was heading back on my way to the station, being escorted by Parawave like majority of times. As I walked beside him, I suddenly felt flames that made my heart stop in place in horror. I stopped walking. No, not in just one location, it was pretty much all over the city, probably 5 places and maybe more that was outside my range. I was quick to understand it. It was a threat. Just why? Why did he have to go this far? Parawave turned after realizing I did too. Pyro, my expression instantly changed to an awkward apologetic smile. Oh my god, I just realized I forgot something really important back at the locker rooms. Just a second, I'll be right back. I shouted, running away. Hey Pyro, wait dash. Parawave shouted after me, but I wasn't there anymore. In a practiced split second, I had already taken my shoes off and was flying up in the pretend direction of the hero agency. If I had really ended up going in that direction, then would have noticed from that alley he was hiding in, so close to us that he could see me. I clicked my tongue without opening my mouth in Morse after tapping the feather that should be able to hear me. Hawks should be able to discern it, at least I hope he does. I knew exactly where in the city the 5 of them were since I've already memorized Kyushu like the back of my hand. For near the streets with people, and the 5th with the brightest flames, deep in the alleys. It was clear that I had to go to the one with the brightest flame. I couldn't trick that person, it was a dangerous situation. If I made one wrong step, he would incinerate the citizens, I know he would. I landed in between some old buildings, Dobby, I spotted the scarred villain blatantly facing his back in my direction, and a smell of burning flesh hit me as soon as I entered the alley. There were 2 to 3 people lying roasted dead and incinerated. It took everything in me to not puke. Bile rose up in my throat. What was this? Why bring me to a murder site? I was seriously mad and feeling sick alongside the fear. Either I hadn't come in time, or did he do this and try to catch my attention? To intimidate me. Why was he doing this? Why did he want to get closer to me or whatever was? My heart was shaking and it took everything in me to not tremble and let out tears. This was terrifying whether I'd like to admit or not. Just why? I wanted to sob. As I told you we'd meet again, he said, turning around with a grin that looked maniacal and the flames on his palm. Right before he turned around, I had to cover up the expression on my face. I can't show any weakness, not yet. No matter what. I decided with a hard head, my stubbornness kicking in. He walked forward. I knew you'd be smart about this. After all, you don't want any of the poor innocent citizens to die, do you? While you're on the hero's path, but, too bad, you were too late this time. He wants to taunt me. Test me. Well, you didn't give me any choice. I said, getting into a fighting position. Stall for time. The one advantage I have right now is how people don't know about my relationship with hawks, so Dobby probably wouldn't know that I carry a feather. You've been up to no good ever since you recovered. Even now, it was there on the news, about incinerated bodies in alleys. This was just a little present for the second time we met. Do you like it? Is he crazy? I didn't know I was getting that famous, especially with you, he said, leaning forward close to my face and then to speak in my ear. I leaned back to try and avoid it, feeling disgusting. I have to wait. I can't take action yet because of his threats. Maybe I can use this to seep some information and answers before Hawks gets here. A part of me just couldn't refuse it. I really wish I had come faster, maybe as soon as I sensed the flames. I was too late. These people couldn't be alive after taking all that heat and looking at the state of their bodies. They're unrecognizable. They were dead. They were dead. It kept ringing in my mind. Dead people. Burned corpses, the sickeningly overwhelming charred smell. They aren't alive anymore. This is a really terrible choice for a reconciliation present for a high school girl, you know. There are better ideas. And naturally I have to keep tabs on my stalker and the League in any way possible. I don't even know why you want anything to do with me. So why? Why do you want to target me so badly? Why kill all those people, after all we've never even met before? It took so much in me to keep my voice steady. He had me cornered. There was no way for me to go but up. That'd be hard if he caught my leg. I was counting everything on Hawks coming. Or else, I don't even know what he wants to do with me. He raised his eyebrows with an amused smile. I see, trying to get information from me. Well, sadly, I'm only here to take you away. If you don't want any more citizens to die, then come with me. I'll take good care of you. He slid his finger across my jaw to tilt my head up to lock eyes with him as he had a grin on his face. His way of speaking, in every manner, tried to get a reaction out of me. To confirm something. What the hell? I don't get him at all. It couldn't be anything related to the League, so he was evading any questions regarding his personal goals. What do you dash? I felt the feather in my pocket struggling. Dobby looked down, noticing the movement in my skirt pocket. Before he could do anything, there was a feather blade stuck at his throat and tinier ones fluttered down. The sound of rustling feathers filled our ears for a second, reaching a little late than the cause. Hawks had a deadly look with his eyes half covered under the glare of his visor. Hawks, Dobby narrowed his eyes and then looked down at me with a sharp look that could cut through ice. I don't know how you did that, but did you forget that there are still clones of me all around the city? But you still called for. Hawks noticed the 3 bodies in the alley too. You must not have known how stronger I've gotten. 7 clones, right? I felt them all over the city on my way here. Try using the flames and see if it works. My quirk can still reach all those distances. I smirked with my hands behind my back, leaning up in a mocking manner on my toes. I don't think I can provoke him with petty dialogues unless I know him, which I don't. But how will he respond to this? And would you be able to relay the situation to them if you're dead? Or unconscious? I stood down, looking to the side while speaking. Considering the last time I and your clone met, you don't know what happened between us or what made you lose before I destroyed it. You wouldn't want to make the same mistake again. With all your actions and wanting to so badly kidnap me at the training camp, you definitely want to meet me in person because you regret not having done that last time. So right now, you're the real one. I don't know your reasons, but after having been captured, we'll figure it out, gradually. With me and Hawks, it'd be a dead end for him. This time he was the one cornered. You really speak like you know it all, don't you? Dobby smirked. Hawks let me speak this entire time and he had a big, almost proud look on his face. I got a call from my sidekick saying she flew back to the agency but she didn't even arrive. I got suspicious and looked around. I found you here luckily. You underestimated her once again, Dobby. You shouldn't have tried to reach out to her here with me around. Do you really want to join the league or not, Hawks? This is really making me doubt your intentions, he said maliciously. What? Oops, I think I made the wrong slip. Did she know about you trying to reach out to the league to join us? She seemed to trust you so much though. He said in a sad tone. I frowned. What is he talking about? Hawks joined the league. I looked at Hawks, who had a blank expression and a cold stare at me. He was waiting to see what I would do to react accordingly. Dobby couldn't see his expression while threatened. What was his plan? It was suspicious in its own way, but if that's the case, I had many reasons to give him a benefit of doubt. I couldn't help but stick to my always neutral stance, and I trusted Hawks more than my own life, no matter what. I smirked back at him. This is interesting news, but I glared. Do you think I'd believe that dumb news? I may be a kid, but I'm not an idiot. Stop trying to fool me with that. I spat back at him in a loathsome manner. Hawks tightened his sword on Dobby's neck. Give up. Your stupid antics won't work here, Dobby. He was unaffected. If anything, his grin widened. Just testing you, whether I was right about your trust or not. Seems like you do. Too bad. I was kind of hoping to sow a seed of doubt. You're right. I would want to know what's happening. Suddenly his figure collapsed into mud like nothing was holding him up anymore, and gravity finally did its work, just in the way I remembered. He was a clone. Then the only way to listen in is I immediately went through the puddle and found a phone that was on a call, and I put it on speaker immediately. The phone cracked after that, as if it was mysteriously a one-use. I kept staring down at the mud puddle, my hands stained in the clone's remains. Even though I found out something tremendous today, there was one thing I knew. That Hawks was not on the villain's side. He can't be. He will never. I stood up and looked at Hawks, who stared at me, a different look in his eyes for a second, which was wiped with his usual grin. Knew you wouldn't believe him, Nugget? I gave him an extremely judging look which made him freeze in the same smile with his eyes half opened. Hey, try lying to me and I'm gonna expose this entire thing to the world, I said with a straight-faced serious stare. And you won't even be able to carry out your mission. It was after the Camino incident on the rooftop. If it's really a mission, it is really too dangerous of one. His expression gradually turned serious. I still can't get used to that look, but I didn't know that just earlier, I had a similar one that startled him too. He raised his hands up in the air with a shrug. I'm really not lying, he said with a lazy look at the corner of his eyes, and then lowered his head, putting his hands back in his pockets with a sigh. Well, we gotta get back to the agency like the excuse you told Parawave, he said, looking at me with the same look. Not here, is it? I nodded tensely. My eyes averted to where the burnt corpses were. I was sweating after that entire ordeal and held my wrist tightly to try and stabilize myself. Even if I didn't want to see it, sometimes your eyes just move without being told to. His wingspan blocked my view. There's no need to look at that. I looked back up at him as he walked forward, and I put my arms around his neck as he carried us both to the agency. I couldn't see his tense expression either the entire time, along with his worry. I was able to collect my thoughts while on our way back to the agency. I had to put aside that image of that alley from just now to the back of my mind by squeezing my eyes shut. There were many possibilities for it, but now was not that time for that. Important things first. Hawks released me after we were in his office. He ran both his hands through his hair, finally bursting and startling me for a second. In it, everything's gone back to how it was supposed to be. You could have just fought him as soon as you saw him. Why did you wait till I arrived? He shouted with his palms facing up in front of him, and then gestured behind him with his palm. Why did you stand still and talk to him like that? Rin, you saw a murder scene. You have stayed composed. If you had fought back, this wouldn't have happened. He paced around, holding his chin tensely, and then turned to ask me angrily, "Do you even have any idea what you did and heard? At least you denied to believe him at that time. I don't know what would have happened if you didn't. And now I'm being threatened by you, that F burned but each," he shouted with his head thrown up, flying up a foot from the ground in his agitation when his wings let out the frustration with a hard swing down. He was being frantic, and there was also distress in his expression for some strange reason I couldn't point out. It only comedic on the outside. He doesn't just easily use my actual name, nor does he curse often. I was overwhelmed by his reactions. There was something bigger underneath. "What do you mean back to how it was supposed to be? Hawks, you have to explain it to me properly," I asked anxiously. Nothing felt right these days, and right now I felt like I was on the middle ground, trying to pull two halves of a boat together by myself. He turned to me while holding his chin with his eyebrows furrowed, then he put his hands in his pockets while walking closer to me, bending with his face right in front of me with a serious expression. "What if I really was with the villains? What are you gonna do?" It was deadly and threatening. And I felt the light tick of his feather sword that came up from behind me and aimed at my neck, the blade part barely leaving any room for movement. I stared right back at him. "Then you're working as a spy. I told you before, no matter how many layers you have, I know that you're always good deep down. Among all those shiny, golden, muddy, dark, and a diverse mix of layers and masks is a golden heart, just like your hair," I joked. "So shut it with the crappy attitude and get that feather away from my neck." He wasn't even aiming at an artery. That's such terrible acting. "I'm not joking, Nugget." He didn't waver, and a thin trickle of blood dripped down my neck. However, I didn't budge a hair either. I raised my hand, which made him tense up a little, but I was holding a handkerchief to simply stop the blood from staining my shirt collar. It won't do good if anyone saw that later. After a few minutes he still stayed the same. "Don't look serious enough when you say Nugget." He frowned with a twitch in his expression as he calmly stood up, facing sideways, and the feather flew back to him. "I've realized now what the HPSC really does in the shadows. But I don't really think what you're doing is something wrong, nor something good. It's just something necessary, because I know the world is only black and white for the normal people to see. It'd be naive if I came to protect my brother and I didn't know that fact." "You don't have to pretend to understand," I ignored him. "You're playing a really important role. Destroying from the inside and outside is how we can truly wipe out the League, and information is crucial. I didn't tell you this, but my hobby since I was a kid, since I decided to protect Izuku, was informations," I said, looking down with a small smile. "Every nook and cranny, about any person I felt was important, so in the future as a hero, if I ever needed it at all, it'd be there for me to use anytime. So I know the importance of information too. Even understanding people, every sign, action, expression, and word from the moment I met them, all played a role. Now when I could do something about it and help you still keep your position, why couldn't I? But I still don't get how I reacted, and him testing my trust in you was something bad. I didn't realize the look in my eyes was different, and he glanced at me, noticing it. Observing people, knowing things about them, it was second nature to me, and deep down I never thought it was nice, prying into people's emotions, and sometimes the possibility of using it. I never liked it, especially with my friends. And the fact that I don't even find something like this, that the HPSC has been doing under wraps, as bad, when it clearly included immoral stuff, I don't know what to think of myself. I might have changed after coming to you. But in the past I did know a ton of stuff about my classmates, from the little dramas, to their relationships with each other, and the rest of it. It made me feel kind of filthy and intrusive. I never used it off course, but the intention with which I learned all of it, I hated it. But I couldn't help it. Why, I just never stopped. Sometimes maybe being ignorant like others might be something peaceful, but what I stepped into gave me a bad feeling. I know for one that's why Hawks was being impatient and anxious. He turned to look at me. "The fact that you might even know about it in Dobby's eyes is dangerous. That's not all," I stated. He tried to divert my attention from the answer. "Something's there, something I don't know. It's shrouded in the last tendrils of darkness and just out of reach for me to figure out on my own soon enough, even if he insists on not telling me. That is all. You don't need to know anything more," he insisted, going to get the first aid kit and brought it back as I tried to think. I lifted my head slightly in realization he was watching me the entire time while getting the first aid kit and observing my reactions and wondering what I'll do next. It makes so much more sense now. There's another reason why you trained me before I came to you. Am I some sort of recruit for the 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧? But since I'm just a normal person and have my own relations, they've been doing it discreetly through you. If I know about your mission somehow and they realize my unknown connection with Dabi, they're likely to want to know what it is. And sometimes I wonder if understanding stuff too soon like this is a good thing. You're likely to be put onto the field to figure it out, because it's an important piece of information. But seriously, what do you mean by it makes so much more sense? He said with an irked, close-eyed smile. He sat on the tea table in front of me as he treated my wound, and sorry about this. I had to see if you would really believe me. I can't have you have any doubts after knowing the truth, he said in a soft voice, the guilt and pain evident in his low tone. And then he grinned. You really surprised me there. Didn't think you'd believe in me that much, Nugget. For some reason, he sounded painful when he said that last few words. I smiled endearingly. I suppose he was happy about the fact that I did believe him. No, I don't think my quick understanding is a bad thing. I'm so glad I didn't misunderstand him. You must have had it hard deceiving me like that. But I wouldn't hold it against you at all. At any point of time over the past year, I would never. His eyes widened. I put my hand to the bandage on my wound. Anyways, you don't have to worry too much about the wound, but now can you tell me the whole thing? And don't try to hold anything back from me thinking I'd change my mind or it's too much for me to know and it's better if I stayed ignorant. It's too late for that, and I also know what being an undercover agent means on both sides. You might know what it means, Nugget, but it doesn't mean you know how it is. Underneath that casual sentence there was a slight desperation he tried to hide that appeared like stunted tree roots, but under that surface is a whole colony of roots, an entire world when you think the huge pine tree was the end of it because it was large enough. And I realize now every reason for Hawk's behavior up until now. This piece of information really changes everything. People won't question his strange actions since he's always been like that, and a part of it always contained truth. He speaks his mind whenever he can, so people know who he actually is. When he lies perfectly, and that's probably his training. To the villains, this carefree dumb bird behavior of his would look lazy and as a mask. He might seem so, but underneath it all is that every movement, action, word and decision of his has a purpose most of the time. We can't even imagine the purpose because we don't even know the first thing about him, and we don't know the first thing about him because we don't know his purposes. The perfect spy. It's not only his quirk that's suitable for it. And now I completely understand you, I said out loud without thinking. His eyes widened, just completely taken aback by what I said, and appeared several feet away in a flash while holding the first aid kit. What? Okay, hey, no, that's not what I put a hand on my head and gestured forward, hesitating, and the situation seemed funny for a moment. I smirked, which sent visible shivers through him. I chuckled lightly. I just meant that there were some things I didn't understand about you before which was cleared just now. Don't get so creeped out by it. He still stared warily and stayed away. I don't have to remind you of how much you know about me because of your feathers, do I? Stop making a big deal out of it. I glared, baring my teeth angrily. Yeah, I was talking about the fact that he knew about me liking Shoto first, or well, second after Izu. It's just the fact that I didn't tell him and he got to know that annoys me sometimes. It's only because you don't even look like it and yet you're so psychic, people might believe you have a third quirk. Though he still relaxed and directed his feathers to carry the first aid kit back to its place. He seemed a bit uncomfortable. It's strange when no one really knows me. The only thing you don't know right now is probably how I came to the 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧 or my name. Not even anyone at 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧. I asked. Knows you, I mean, he shrugged with an asymmetrical smile. Not even the president. At least she knows everything about me, just not. I can't exactly say that I know you completely either. Of course, it'd be even creepier. I had a strained smile, and then he asked with serious concern, Are you okay? About what? I asked jokingly. About what you saw at the alley. He said warily. I paused, the image of that scene flashing in my mind again, suddenly turning uncomfortable with a hand on my elbow. Roasted bodies, they were already dead by the time I came. I stated, looking straight ahead with an expressionless face. But inside, my heart quavered at the thought of the scene. I still remember the smell of burnt flesh and the scent of blood that had drenched the alley and permeated my nose. But I tried to ignore it that time because of Dobby in front of me. How does he just stand so nonchalantly in that smell, knowing the murder he committed? Like it was so normal. I hadn't realized I had lightly covered my nose and mouth automatically while hugging myself and trembling. Suddenly I was wrapped in something and came back to reality to realize Hawks was hugging me with his wings surrounding me and patted my head. Sorry you had to see that. I wish I could tell you to forget about it. You'll be facing much worse as you get into this more and more. But I'll be here for you if you want to talk about any of it. I lowered my head and nodded slightly. I know that, and thanks. The hug was stable and it felt like he already carried the world on his shoulders the way it was firm and comforting. After that, I learned the entire truth. I frowned in annoyance. Is that why you didn't let me fight even one villain and distanced yourself from me for a while? Is that the only thing you saw in everything I just said? You're really too eager to fight a villain, huh? Did you like your encounters with the League that much? And missed me so much? He grinned cheekily. I paused, ignoring his question. There's no need to even answer them. Well, it's easier to believe that the HPSC ordered you to teach me than you having done it on your own accord and about me wasting my potential and blah blah blah. I flapped my fingers in a talking gesture. I'm not an idiot to completely believe in emotional reasons for everything, especially with your character. You wouldn't be so selfless or stupid to train a random person you never knew. I deadpanned, though in that case, even after all that, why did you try to go against the HPSC's orders unlike the first time? To keep me away from all of this. You didn't have to. I was looking at my hands on my lap. Yeah, in that case, if he only reluctantly followed orders to train me, there was no reason for him to take my side. Hawks had an incredulous look on his face and also mock hurt. Then he spoke with his grin. You didn't have to put it that way, Nugget. Sure, I didn't want to train you at first, but people grow closer and fonder after one entire year, you know. It hurts that you speak as if I have no feelings. I didn't want what happened to me happen to you too. You were nice and good and wanted to simply protect your brother. You haven't seen that harsh stuff of the world yet, he said as if chatting casually with his head perched on his hand and elbow on his knee, and then more genuine and even with a hint of sadness. But, today, you took it quite well. Surprisingly so. He smiled brightly with closed eyes. Good to know you're not completely psychic. Man, I had to explain it all like to a little hatchling, he complained with a pout. What he said brought a smile on my face. Even through all that, he started to really care about teaching me in the end. That's enough. Even if I wouldn't hold it against him at any point of time, I would feel a little sad if all of it was a lie. I leaned forward and hugged him. He hugged back though with a startle. Thank you, Hawks, I said genuinely, and then with a bit of joke, I love you too. Oh my goodness, I didn't know my charm's so effective. I won over your heart too, Nugget. Sadly it's illegal dash. My aura turned pissed and then he chuckled. Love you 3, Nugget, he said and buried his face slightly. After a bit we went back to topic. Okay, now that I know everything and all of this has happened, I'm assuming I have to meet the HPSC president. I mean, I have to take the weight of the knowledge. But can I do that so easily? I asked as if asking about eating dessert after main course. You are way too calm about this. Do you expect me to waste time panicking, crying and freaking out and annoy you with it all at the same time? I shouted back. Though we weren't really arguing. After that discussion, I had to get to the station but I missed this train. We'll have to fly you to the next station and get you on a train. With a race we can reach fairly quickly. Hawks smirked in challenge. I grinned back too, deciding to think about all of this later and forget about it for now. Before we could start, there was a harsh knocking on the door. Boss. You told me to wait or look all around the building in every corner, but I couldn't find Pyro. She even missed her train and didn't come back. I'm worried, Dash. Oh, so that's how he kept Parawave busy. Hawks opened the door from behind me and Parawave stood there seeing me in front of him and paused. His reaction was hilarious. Sorry, I found what I needed, but Hawks wanted to talk about the Camino incident, so I stayed back thinking of catching up to the train in the next station. I forgot about informing you. You must have been so worried. I apologize, I said, bowing down. No, it's fine. I'm glad you're okay. He sighed in relief. I was worried that something happened on your way here, what with your class and all. How will you get to the next station? You won't be able to catch up even on cab. He wasn't wrong, both of us thought. But that was kind of him. You'll get wrinkles with all those worries, dear sidekick. Take it cool. Hawks grinned and patted Parawave's shoulder by the wrist like he was an adorable puppy, though he was probably far from it. You forget that the fastest man is standing right in front of ya. I'll drop her on my own, we'll probably have a race too. Right, Pyro? I nodded immediately with a smile. Alright then, that makes sense, then do I go back on my own? Parawave felt a little bummed now after all that running around and worrying. Yes. Good work. Hawks turned the sidekick around with his feathers and waving with a smile. Thank you and sorry for worrying you again, see you on Wednesday? I said with an apologetic expression. Parawave nodded and left while waving back with a sweet smile that only showed as a silhouette through the cloth of his mask that covered his head along with the bodysuit. Don't worry about it, as long as you're okay. See you on Wednesday. After that, me and Hawks raced together to the next train station that the train would arrive at, and I tied Crocs on me to fly, rather than wearing my costume. Of course, he won, but we got there in record and the right time as the train had just arrived. He attracted quite a bit of attention but left waving and saying among all those squeals while flying up away from people's reach that I was an intern to those who asked him who I was. Oh, how nice he's dropping his intern personally at the station. As expected, Hawks really is the best. And he got some reputation boost as well. But I disappeared before I was caught and nobody knew who this mysterious intern was. It wouldn't take too long for them to figure out anyways. It's not like he was hiding his interns. It's been a few days since Izu's first work study. And he's still really silent. All of them in fact were still down about that whatever it was. For that very reason, Izu has also been losing focus in class, including almost drowning at the USJ during rescue training class. He was also not only worrying about whatever happened at his work study but also about All Might. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and walked up to my brother at his seat as soon as the lunch bell rang and placed a hand on his shoulder. Izu, if it's worrying you that much, just go talk to him. He only jerked very slightly at first and almost turned to face me until he heard my voice and then looked down with his fists clenched on the table. He nodded and stood up with a determined expression and left the classroom fairly fast without another word, clearly with a lot of things in mind. Talk about what? Katsuki asked, turning back in his seat. He knew who Izu was going to talk to? You'll get to know soon, I said with a smile. If you know, then why don't you just answer him yourself? He grumbled. Know what? I won't really know until Izu tells me. What I have are only guesses you'll get to know later. Don't worry though, I was a little surprised Katsuki recognized that fact. I didn't know when it started or how, but he seems to know me better than I thought he did. He turned around with a "T, who's worrying?" I just smiled helplessly and turned to leave to go to the cafeteria for lunch with Shoto, who was waiting for me a row away with a pretty blank expression which was normal for him, but I just can't help but find it so handsome. Oh, just why, what were you talking about? He asked as we walked to the exit of the class together while I tried to tone down the pinkness in my cheeks. Did he make you angry? You're red. I was hit with a momentary deadpan that made the pink fly away. One moment he's sizzling and the next he's so cute. Will I ever escape these death traps? Maybe he got it from the phrase, red with anger, that was nothing, the room just suddenly felt hot. Am I really using this stupid excuse? And I was just telling Izu to go and ask All Might about this problem he had with his quirk, since their quirks are so similar. And Katsuki just commented about it and stuff. Why don't I just go and chant Thankfully he bought it. Then he was talking about how everyone at the work study's been oddly out of it since a few days. However, when I glanced at my phone with a text from Hawks, I went into my own thoughts without realizing it. Next week I was gonna meet the president of the HPSC head. I really don't know why they chose me. I had never done anything to remotely attract any of that sort of attention except for the sludge villain attack, where by the way I hadn't even won. Even Hawks genuinely didn't know why. The only thing I could think of was my hybrid quirk that would be useful against Dabi, but back then there was no League of Villains, at least not an active one with Dabi in it, and they couldn't have predicted that they would need me. Or was there a foresight quirk like Nighteyes but not exactly the same? Or was there something else? Something they're hiding about me that I don't know of. I don't know, but it was worrying me like a big dumbbell on my heart. And knowing Hawks is a double spy is kind of scary. It's still true that it's just as dangerous as it is useful to know information. I'm glad I know about it in a sense, but because of that I should also be able to lie if I ever meet Dobby, who's most likely to suspect that something like what happened with me and Hawks after he left happened. I can barely hold myself from freaking out. Not to mention the nightmares I get every night from that scene. I don't even know when I'll be able to get rid of them. Thankfully I don't easily get dark circles. In Ririn, what's wrong? Shoto asked me as I was just staring at my plate expressionlessly with my head perched on my hand whose wrist he held and tried to pull it away to catch my attention. I perked up immediately as my head lost its support. And nearly dropped. Shoto, right? Sorry, I was just thinking about my work study. I slipped my hand into his with a smile and put on a slightly frustrated one. Just the usual. Hawks just insists on having me catch up first. He really likes working alone. Dunno why he even has an agency in the first place. Not to mention also extremely lazy to deal with paperwork, so that's why he has sidekicks. But it's better not to tell anyone else about that, I said jokingly. That was not true. He shouldn't be working alone. I used to find it sad that he worked alone, even more so now that I know the truth. How could a person keep working alone like this forever with no one watching his back because they couldn't keep up with his speed? I couldn't accept that, and also the fact that if I did anything wrong, it would ruin his plans when information really was very necessary right now. The past few days I've learnt that despite being terrible at lying, when it comes to serious matters, I can be a really good liar. It was almost like a blessing and a sick joke. Or maybe I only thought I was terrible at lying. He probably just wants you to get stronger. You'll get your chance, don't worry. Shoto squeezed my hand reassuringly. Even with a straight expression, he seemed to be smiling through his eyes. I've starting become even more conscious about him lately, but that just makes me like him even more. And I freely let myself into it. True, it must be really frustrating to try and catch up to the fastest hero in Japan, but I'm sure you will. Because despite having a speed quirk, I'm still second to you in terms of it. If anyone can do it, you, Kaneda said after chopping a hand down and trying to comfort me with a firm, confident smile. Yeah. I mean, I still can't get over your speed record. Yura said, lifting her chopsticks. Don't let it bother you too much. She cheery nodded with a bright smile. I'm whining so much about something like this, but you guys are supporting me nonetheless. Thank you guys. Especially Shoto. I try to not complain too much in front of him. It's so insensitive of me. But just now I had no other choice but to bring it up again with no other excuse for my zoning out. Don't worry about me, Shoto said as if recognizing it. Really, what do I do with him? After Izuku talked to All Might, although he was no less pensive, at least the bad tension seemed to have gone. I'll ask him it later. In any case, it'd be strange if I didn't, and I want some confirmation whether I like it or not. In the evening after coming back from practice I did, and he told me about All Might nearing death, around this year or the next. I had a feeling. All Might denied it during the sports festival, but it really was true, it seems. However, it's saddening. I can't even imagine All Might back at the sports festival. Did he know that this would happen sometime in the future when he said not to burden myself too much? No, that couldn't have been true, but it was probably his experience that made him think that. It was almost scary. Did you know about it, Rin? Izuku asked, and I looked at him, getting out of my thoughts and the light tears lining my eyes. I wiped them away as he jumped a bit. I mean, you don't seem that surprised, he said with his fists on his knees and his arms stiff as he looked down. Yeah, I could guess most of it. There are only a few reasons why Night Eye would remain estranged from All Might and even fight over giving OFA to Togata instead of you. If he really did like All Might that much, then he would have respected his wishes no matter what unless there was a strong reason. So as it stands, it was because there were consequences to giving OFA to you. Plus, at the sports festival, you said there was also a faint apparition of All Might in that vision of dead successors. It seemed as if parts of my voice choked a bit, my eyes watering up again for the third time the past half an hour, my fists clenched. Izuku frowned, holding my hands for comfort, and I let him, opening my hands and tightening them on his too, being able to feel the rough calluses and scars on them. How his hands have changed in 6 months, it was another cause for some tears to fall that only startled him, but I continued speaking. Dead successors have retained themselves in the quirk. I felt like it couldn't be just power transfer but the life force as well. It was the worst scenario. So I went to ask him again. He gave a strange reply while also trying to say that everything was fine. I recalled that and put 2 and 2 together. Then again, it couldn't be because of that All Might would die. OFA is a mystery in itself, isn't it? Izu just stared at me with a poker expression. When did you? No, never mind that. He had an almost odd expression as his mouth was in an O. You really are amazing, Rin. With such little information, I should really learn from it, he said, holding his chin and looking down seriously, leaving our hands. I giggled and ruffled his messy but soft green hair that was almost identical to mine with both hands. His head lowered and then he looked up, his own hands going to his hair with a slight cute crunch of his nose. Don't think too much, you are very amazing yourself. I read emotions and thoughts from reactions, but no one can think as much or as fast as you in difficult situations, nor can anyone compete with you on self-introspection and mumbling to yourself. I said, grinning. Izu deflated and still looked at me with a skeptic frown. Is that supposed to be a compliment? Of course. It's an amazing talent. And you know more about All Might than anyone, and you have the biggest heart, and the most hard-working, and the list goes on. I'm at most only second to you or even lower in all of those aspects except for when it comes to people. No. You're really kind too. And have a really big heart. Why would you say that, Rin? Izu said hurriedly. Thank you, but I just said you're better than me in all of those, I said with a laughing smile. Anytime and always. Oh, he paused and then looked down, rubbing the back of his neck in embarrassment and a small blush. Thanks. You really always know to help me when I'm down. I wasn't just saying it to make him feel better. Izu suddenly held my elbows firmly as if he wanted me to hear the important thing he said next, and as if I'd run away. He connected our foreheads as he spoke. You should have told me. You were suffering while keeping it inside, weren't you? I always feel better when I talk to you. I want to do the same, Rin. His hold turned a bit more gentle as if pleading. I was surprised. My mind couldn't help but move to the constant uneasiness that's been plaguing my heart for a while. I really want to tell you this, Izu. I really do, to the point I feel like crying. But I can't. I took a deep breath with closed eyes and so with a soft smile, I just wasn't sure of it. It's just like the information I keep with me with no particular conclusion. And when I realized it, I felt like All Might should be the one to tell you, Izu. Plus I didn't want to say it myself. I didn't want to make it true with my own mouth. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. And for all the things I'm not telling you. I squeezed his hands lightly with a piteous and apologetic expression. He owed, as if realizing that's also a point of view while sitting up, our hands still in each other's. He smiled. Yeah, that's understandable. Though I only told the truth right now, a million secrets hid in the truth's shadow and promises untold. Should we go inside though? It's getting really dark and we have to dash, I was saying. Rin, Midoriya, it's dinner time, Shoto said, appearing through the front door. Eat dinner, I finished. Izu had come outside as soon as I finished my evening flying practice, so we sat here at the front porch and talked. I got up with a jump and skipped to the door where Shoto waited for us to come, and Izu followed behind us with a smile, eyes shining. What do we have for dinner today? I asked, walking beside him. Soba for us and ramen for some of the others, Shoto said, looking down at me with the faintest of smiles. I brightened up. Did they get the wasabi? It got over yesterday, she nodded. Who'd have thought at the beginning of the year that we had similar taste and would also end up together? Well, not yet, but you get the idea. I said, scratching my cheek and looking down, embarrassed after saying it. And I was annoying you the first time we sat at a lunch table together? It couldn't have been that annoying, Shoto said, perplexed. Seemingly he had already forgotten how he felt back then. You were really annoyed, especially since I asked you to show your flames. You are disturbing me, don't bother me while I'm eating, I teased him while trying to imitate his deep voice with mostly made-up words. Shoto looked away with a shadow forming on his face and a deeply regretful expression. Forget it, please. Well, no. Things are different now, and how could I forget the first longest conversation we ever had? I said, looking up with my hands behind my back. He looked back at me, suddenly taken aback, about to turn red when Toru shouted, interrupting, "Hey lovebirds! Come help us keep an eye on the noodles while you talk to each other." Pinky giggled beside her with a sneer. "Is it talking or flirting? Ah man, don't make us singles feel so bad, you know." Kaminari, we both whipped our heads in her direction with completely embarrassed blushes. My face slowly turned into an evil smirk while still retaining a bit of the blush. "Oh really? We'll come right away," I said, walking towards them as they took a few steps back warily with a nervous smile. Pinky looked beside her and suddenly found Toru missing. Being the best at camouflage in this class, she had escaped. Mina flinched with a light screech. "Hagakure. That's not fair. You deserter." "Sorry Mina. Everyone for themselves." Her voice sounded from somewhere far away in the common area, and Shoji flinched, finding the voice nearby him. "You should give a heads up at such times, Hagakure." "Oops, sorry." "Well, I can think about Toru next time, but this certain pair has been the source of all teasing since the beginning right up till now. I can't let it go now." I ran towards her as she hid behind Yamamo, holding on to her on either side, and bent down. "Help me, Yamamo." Yamamo's sweat dropped with a smile while looking down at Mina. "Well, you shouldn't have teased them like that. It's been going on for quite some time. Rin's bound to snap someday, and we already warned you about it more than once." "You can't hide behind her forever, Pinky," I said, trying to catch her, though she kept spinning Yamamo with her and dodging left to right, repeatedly making her yelp. Behind us, most of the class was watching the scene with smiles and laughter, and some like Kaminari and Shiro teased Shoto, who was slightly uncomfortable. Grapes was fuming in a purple aura and then started crying BLD tears of anger at his single life and Shoto's undeniable charm, and also cursing it at the same time, and then suddenly turned smug with a hand against his chin, saying at least he didn't pass the provisional licensing exam, because of which we aren't exactly a couple. Shiro mocked him, saying it won't be long till he gets it, and to stop being petty and mean about us. I stopped chasing Mina and folded my arms lividly and went to watch over the noodles, and Shoto came up too to join me, finally getting rid of those boys. Still taking what they said earlier for both of us to watch the noodles seriously. Mina inched away slowly and I left her, for now. Well, apparently only I actually watched the noodles, cause Shoto apparently doesn't know, nor has he ever cooked noodles before. He was so adorably awkwardly honest about it. When we were bringing the pot to the counter and away from the stove, I excused myself, letting my flames do the work while keeping the food warm, and finally caught the pink girl and pulled a tickle monster as she cried and laughed at the same time, trying to unsuccessfully get away. Aizu watched on with a sweat drop, and Yamamo with a smile from the side, both that were helpless. "Rin's tickle monster," he muttered dreadfully. "Are you ticklish, Deku?" Yura asked him, and he flinched to see her beside him. "Oh, Uraraka." "Not really," he said, looking everywhere but her while sweating, and she remained clueless. "You're really terrible at lying, Midoriya," Sato stated. Yamamo's hair was slightly messed up, with a few strands sticking out of her usually perfect hair from being used as a shield earlier, and she pulled off her hair tie to smooth it up again into a ponytail. "Huh, what, Midoriya's ticklish?" Shiro turned behind to them, and Aizu flinched and denied profusely while shaking his head and hands up in defense. Kaminari held his chin with a smug smirk. "Should we test it out?" Aizu screeched, backing away. "I swear, I really am not." "Stop lying, Ed," Katsuki called him out with a devious smirk. "Guys, you should leave the poor boy alone," Kirishima said nervously while Aizu nodded fervently. "Are you feeling sympathetic, Kirishima?" Tsu asked harmlessly on the outside. He turned to look back warily. "Heh. No dash," and soon all tickling hell broke loose and several people disappeared in the middle of the chaos too to escape. Even Katsuki, while grumbling, "This SHT's so lame, thankfully I wasn't ticklish, or more like people didn't know where I was ticklish." The day before my joint work study with Tokoyami, I sat with the girls at lunch. Yura was really out of it again and stared at her rice bowl. "Achiko, Achiko." Tsu woke her up again. "You should probably eat. You were staring at your bowl for quite some time," she said with a look that seemed normal to the others, however to me it looked empathetic. "Right?" Yura said, starting to stuff the rice into her mouth. It seemed as if some sort of silent communication passed between the two in front of us. Tsu was not doing that great either, but it was her way of handling whatever they were going through. "I wonder what happened at your work study that got you four like this?" Kyoka commented. "Yes, although, If something's worrying you like this, please tell us. We're your friends, so we want to help you as much as we can even though you can't tell us the full details, Yamamoto said with a caring smile. Tsu and Yura smiled thankfully and nodded. Yeah, whatever it is you guys are worrying about, nothing can ever be truly hopeless if we fight for it. As heroes we fight to keep and give hope. We're here for you, I said with a small smile too. Yes, we should just fight. Toru cheered to help and Pinky nodded with a smile. Yura had a small smile as she looked down. Thanks, you guys. Then she looked up at all of us with a determined smile. Yes, everything will be alright, as long as we don't give up hope. That's what heroes are for. Tsu nodded too determined and appreciatively. Thank you, we will work hard. All of us nodded encouragingly and supportively. If I think about it, I haven't told them about Dabi stalking me like I promised Shoto, Kirishima and Yamamoto that day at the hospital. But even if I wanted to tell them now, I don't think I'll be able to do it properly just yet. I need some more time to prepare for it. Especially after encountering with Dabi again a few days back, or I won't be able to hide what I want. The next day, all 6 of us work-study students were headed for our work studies. I couldn't really get to say bye to Izu and the others since me and Tokoyami left for our work studies before the sun even rose. We had to always catch a really early train to go to Kyushu that was far from here. It was the same every time we went, and we ate our breakfast in the train from the menu there. On these days I couldn't work out either. The day went by normally, and now that I understood why Hawks was trying to push me, I wasn't as frustrated by it. But also hiding my true strength and falsely exaggerating about Tadabi was a bit of a mistake, so I decided to also train my quirk to turn that into reality. It was really hard, harder than most of the training I ever did, but I had to improve. It'll always be harder with each level I had to cross. Though I had a slight unsettling feeling since morning, I don't even know what's going on, but it was a different feeling from being worried about the league for the past few days. I had no idea what was going to go down on Izu's side. Rin, you appear to be quite unsettled about something since this morning. Is something the matter? You haven't been focusing as much as usual. Tokoyami asked as we were going back to the agency while taking a break for lunch and order some takeout. I suppose it's natural he realized it. We learned quite a lot about the others' fighting skills and about each other in general after so many internships together and as comrades in the race against Hawks. Hawks had looked back at that moment. He probably thought it was about the league. It's not wrong, I am thinking about the league almost every day, but I wouldn't show it. I smiled to show I was fine. No, not really. Well, I mean, I'm just worried about Izu. I keep getting this feeling whenever something's wrong, just like back at the mall incident. Weird, right? An emotional variation of twin telepathy. I never thought it would be true. Tokoyami's head was tilted down solemnly with closed eyes. The feeling that something lurks in the darkness is certainly not something to be taken lightly, he said looking up at me. However, your brother is with the pros, so do not worry, I'm sure he will be fine. I nodded with a smile. I know, but I can't help it. It's so weird that it's happened a few times before, and so I can't help but not ignore it. And considering Izu's history of recklessness, who wouldn't worry? Though, he did come out unscathed both times, and is still alive despite that recklessness. It was a sacrifice and I had to stay here for my own reasons. I can't help him in every fight, I had to trust him. I sighed. I don't know how many times I've told myself that ever since coming to you. Tokoyami's sweat dropped at my sigh, but after that I seemed to be a bit better, so he didn't ask. By after lunch, there was news of a big fight putting down 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙖𝙧𝙮 that imprisoned and abused a young girl and the involvement of the League of Villains. Not to mention the vehicles transporting the villains had been attacked by the League. Kai Chisaki also lost his hands and the hero Snatch had died while fighting the League due to burning the lower half of his body completely. It wasn't hard to guess who it was that did those two. It was frustrating that the man I met a few days ago had killed yet another person. I had to clench my elbow to try and stop the shaking before anyone could notice. I had let him go that day, but I still had to pretend to ignore all of this like it wasn't my fault. It might not be, but that feeling still stuck. I looked up and saw Hawks back as we flew to an area to deal with a villain as an emergency. In his job he has to turn a blind eye to all their crimes. It's not that he doesn't feel the guilt and remorse, but he's much better at hiding it. He was used to this. For the endgame, the only one who was going too fast into the future rather than fighting in the present. But it's not that easy to look at the big picture. Can I pull it off? I didn't get time to call or even text Izu and the others about the 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮 incident since we had an emergency here. I should after dealing with this. When we were a few hundred meters away, there's fire. I shouted. I was already dealing with it before landing. 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮 said. People were being carried away by his feathers through the gaps in extinguishing fire that was because of me, but this fire's not all, I informed with a tense expression. It was chaos. And at the center of it all was a man with crazed marin hair laughing maniacally. Chaos, the world should descend into chaos. It's the only way for retribution to be delivered, liberation of our souls. I will not sit by and watch all this false order take place. Use it all, be free. The quirks of everyone around were all activated, including ordinary civilians. There still was fire around on the street and buildings that I doused quickly. It was hard to decide who to focus on when everyone was having trouble with their quirks going over the limit. Hawks was also starting to have trouble transporting some of them away. He had a tense expression as if he was trying to deal with something. Perhaps it took some time to take effect for us, so all of a sudden, flames spouted from my mouth as I lurched with a hand on my throat and startled and struck with the same kind of confusion others did as my quirk didn't listen to me and went wild like it had a mind of its own. With extreme difficulty, I was barely able to stop the flames from roaring straight ahead and hurting everyone around, to instead spill downwards in a blue-green waterfall. I can't let the flames hurt others. I opened one of my eyes while I had my hands at my throat in pain. The temperature was growing crazy too. This villain seems to have some forcible activation quirk that was sent in shockwaves since all this started as soon as we entered a 300-meter radius of him and took effect a little later, starting with Hawk's feathers that was closer to him and then Hawk's himself, and then me. There were many who couldn't get away while busy trying to suppress their own quirks. I see that Hawks is able to still control his feathers while seeming like he was in pain, and I think his feathers' sensitivity was really affecting him a lot. I realized and tried my pyrokinesis, which worked well enough. This villain's quirk doesn't affect kinesis quirks. I was able to deal with my dragon breath a bit better. But my flame sensors were burning into my brain and the range was way larger than I was used to. The amount of input was painful and went over at 1 kilometer and still increasing. I let go of my fire breath quirk as unlimited amount of flames came out at 2000 degrees. The temperature was constantly increasing. I can't afford to concentrate on that right now. I directed my flames to go up in the air. My face and eyes could feel the blazing heat even if I was kind of resistant to fire. Meanwhile, I sent a croc to tie up the villain's neck to try to choke him unconscious. I had also sent a wavering stop sign all around us at the border of the range of the villain's quirk. They don't even know the situation. If anyone barged in that has a quirk, it was going to be even more people to deal with, even if it was the heroes. I hoped 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮, who was still a little behind, would at least get the idea and stop anyone who didn't heed to the sign from entering. No, never mind, I'm fully sure he'll get it. What does she mean? 𝙎𝙎𝙧𝙮 mumbled in utter confusion when the flaming stop sign stopped him from going further. Is it some serious threat? Something that even other pros can't enter because of? That's so stupid. How can the both of them handle anything that's serious all on their own in there? Even the other heroes were saying the same thing. But despite his ego, 𝙎𝙎𝙧𝙮 knew he couldn't give in to that dark side of him. There must be a reason Rin put up this sign. Dark Shadow spoke up. 𝙎𝙎𝙧𝙮 nodded in agreement too, choosing to trust his classmate, sure that she wouldn't do something as stupid as blocking reinforcement. Just then Horus was speaking. The comms in this range have been disabled. And something seems to be wrong in there. Why would Pyro dash? We need to get in the dash. We shouldn't go inside. I think they have it under control in there and Pyro wouldn't do something stupid. 𝙎𝙎𝙧𝙮 spoke up. Tsukuyami. Let's trust them. Alright, apparently some people didn't want to sit back despite the warning broadcasted over the comms that were still working. A media person slipped in while the heroes and police weren't looking, and after some time suddenly smoke started spreading lightly and quickly started growing stronger and thicker. Everyone moved back immediately and the person's colleague shouted to save him somehow. Why isn't he coming out? His quirk must be affecting him. Isn't there someone to blow out the smoke? Along with the blue-green pillar of flames that was definitely Rin, there was dense smoke rising now too at this location. Tokoyami ran over there along with the other sidekicks as the police took control of the border immediately and not letting anyone in. Heroes and citizens alike, having guessed that there's someone who's making quirks go haywire inside. People were moving away from the cloud of smoke that was getting thicker as time passed. As if the cameraman's quirk was getting stronger than ever before. I could get him out, but I can't see him. The lasso hero shouted with her face in her sleeve and an eye closed. Can anyone try to blow the smoke away? Tokoyami looked around and saw a large cloth covering a car and got an idea. Dark Shadow? On it, boss. Dark Shadow spun over there and pulled it up into its dark claws, and he went forward when people shouted at what he was doing. I'll blow the smoke away. Please work fast, he said. Yeah, the lasso hero said, and Dark Shadow turned huge and then pulled the cloth down as a fan, creating a gust of wind that created enough of a view to show the media person lying unconscious on the floor. He was hit with confusion at the loss of control on his quirk that he couldn't think fast enough to escape the zone, and the smoke affected him in turn. The lasso hero immediately pulled the man out of the zone as his quirk slowly decreased, emitting all the smoke, and Dark Shadow on the side continued trying to blow the smoke away to the left and right with a socializing smile. The ambulance quickly took care of the man as the fire pillar in the distance subsided, and after a few moments, so did the fire boundary, indicating that the incident was probably over and it was safe to go inside now. Hawks had tried sending his feathers to the villain but faltered again, almost falling to the ground as he was sweating from all the resisting. The screams of the people, the heat from the lava, and now even my flames that I'm unable to control, even the slightest wind and moving the people who had their quirks all activated was painfully intense for him. Like 1,000 needles were piercing him. Not to mention additionally there was a guy blaring loud music from the mutation speakers on his ears with BLD trickling from them from the backlash. The villain tried shouting and even tried to increase the extent of his quirk, but he could not stop me from keeping a control on the croc around his neck. However, while I was attempting to get him unconscious, Hawk's feather came up behind the villain and hit a pressure point, completing the job while he was distracted. Apparently, I had simply bought some time for Hawks to be able to act, but that's all right, or so I'd like to think, to be more mature. Everyone was released from his quirk. I relaxed and knelt on the ground as my throat was really burnt up and the pounding in my head decreased. It all happened in barely a minute. Finally, I could reduce the embers of flames in the lava, stopping it from flowing and turning it into volcanic rock just before it hit a kid who had fallen down. He couldn't run while crying to his mom, who was the one whose lava had spilled. Hawks had landed beside me while breathing heavily from all the strain. Hearing and feeling everything at this level is torture, not to mention that guy with the speaker's quirk. She looked down at me. Are you alright, Pyro? It's good that that villain couldn't affect Kinesis quirks. You did an amazing job buying time back there, he said with a bright grin. You really almost beat me. I tried to speak and ended up sending words of fire instead. I had dissipated the flames warning and boundary I had created so the police, ambulance, and other heroes could come in, and Hawks handed the villain over to the police that was now tied up in the same crock. All of the citizens who had just recovered from their quirks were rejoicing, and the lady with the lava quirk was hugging her child with tears. Hey, that girl defeated the villain. Wait, isn't she from 𝙎𝙬? Although the flames from her mouth were really hot and uncomfortable for some time, she still managed to make the villain unconscious by choking him right. She's Rin Midoriya, isn't she? She won third in the sports festival. What's her hero name? I got up and spread the letters above me, I said with an awkward smile while pointing up, and then bowed. Hey, no problem, you still did a great job in the meantime. Yes, you couldn't have tried controlling your fire breath and defeat the villain? That dragon breath sure was strong. We didn't even notice the feather. As expected of Hawks, he's on a whole other league, don't mind it. Even with all that, both of them defeated the villain. That's the difference between us and pros. Thanks for saving us. Miss Pyro, can I have your autograph? The little kid from earlier had gotten down from his mom's arms and walked over to me and asked shyly, but his eyes were shining. Everything about it made me so happy. I smiled serenely and nodded, kneeling down and patting his head. Are you feeling okay? I whispered out, barely able to speak, but the kid heard me and nodded brightly. I smiled and took the piece of paper from him and asked his name with a silent look as he replied, and I wrote down, 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙢𝙧𝙮, the dragon breath hero, Pyro, with only my flames as something unique to me. It looked like a blue-green stamp formed on the paper, and when it faded, brownish letters were visible on it. It was a shame I couldn't speak properly on my kind of debut, but I was still happy about it. Hawks was right beside me, and people flocked to him while some also spoke to me in the middle while thanking us both. I was asked for autographs from some more people, and they commented excitedly about how I had burned the autograph in as if it had only helped saved people by buying time for Hawks because of his momentary weakness. I couldn't have gotten as famous. I mean, Kirishima's debut was really amazing, and Yura and Tsu had worked together on their own and defeated 2 giant villains, also with Hato's help. So I didn't think mine was much until the news came the next day. Apparently it was very noticeable because of my dragon breath flying up in the sky like a bright pillar. They almost thought it was the villain until it was cleared later on. Tokoyami ran up to us. Rin. Pus. Tokoyami, I turned around, now freer of the people surrounding us. I got your message. You didn't want anyone to enter, right? He asked, breathing heavily from all the running. But what happened? I smiled brightly, speaking in a hoarse voice. I knew you would get it. He noticed my voice cracking and wondered what happened that got me to overuse my dragon breath, and just then he noticed the surrounding damage too. I had swallowed a healing gummy that I had previously asked Recovery Girl for as part of the support items for my costume, so I was able to speak a bit now. She was quite generous with clear instructions on not overusing it. The villain had a chaos quirk that forcibly activated and pushed all but kinetic quirks up to a certain range. Hawks managed to defeat the villain in the end after I bought some time. I explained briefly and he nodded. I see, I wish I could have helped, but that would have made Dark Shadow dangerous. I was surprised that he said that on his own and was quite normal about it and not frustrated. Hawks came up escaping the crowd and put an arm each on both our shoulders with a big grin. 2 of my employees just got their debut. It's such a happy occasion, we have to celebrate. My treat. His wings spread widely and hugged us both as we both embarrassed at the situation. Not to mention the media took a nice picture of it with Hawks and Dark Shadow saying cheese and me and Tokoyami looking startled. It felt like we're 2 little baby birds in the arms of an overbearing and super cheerful mama bird along with a shadow bird. The thought made me smile as the second pic turned out with me smiling at something that would make others wonder what I was thinking of, and Tokoyami looking a little embarrassed in that serious face of his while looking up at Hawks from the corner of his eye. After the day nearly ended, Hawks took us off work early and brought us both to a restaurant to eat yakitori for celebration. So how is it? He asked eagerly while holding a skewer in one hand. We were sitting on cushions with a grill in front of us on the shibudai. Hawks was sitting on one side for extra space for his wingspan in the private room we were in, and me and Tokoyami sat on the other side, both of us in our uniforms. It's really delectable, Tokoyami said with wide eyes. Yeah, it's amazing. Better than the constant KFC, I said jokingly. I won't deny that, Hawks said cheerfully. It's the best yakitori in Kyushu after all. Hawks does like KFC and it's easier to get during work, but he did say that he loved yakitori the best. I've wondered how the one at his favorite restaurant tasted like. It seriously didn't disappoint. I had called Izuku when I had time right after the chaos quirk villain incident in the evening. He was shaken up, but he still explained about how he met this little girl Eri on his first work study while patrolling with Togata, and how Chisaki appeared soon after, the entire story after that with the 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮 and the League, and also meeting Toga. It was confirmed then that Toga did have the same quirk and was the one who had impersonated Kami Utsushima from Shiketsu in the provisional licensing exam. It was painful to hear about that little girl. I had wanted to see her and wished I had been a part of the rescue too. But I'm glad she's okay now. It was infuriating to think that they had used a little girl's body to do so many experiments. She had suffered so much. The raid might have been a success, but the losses were really hard. Kirishima was apparently hurt all over. Togata lost his quirk, not to mention Naitai's death, which was the most shocking part of all. If the League did help the heroes defeat 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙧𝙮, it could be said that they weren't in a completely agreeable relationship with them. The only reasons why they would cooperate was again either because they were spies and planned to put down and conquer 𝙎𝙎𝙧𝙮, or because they were threatened, which led them to wanting to destroy them by any means necessary, even if it meant using the heroes. It could also be possible that the League reached out to them first after gaining some intel, since they had been laying low and had no sponsors. So Toga and Twice could have been spies, or they were tribute, or both. After the sumptuous dinner, in which unfortunately I could only half enjoy the food I was eating, we finally went to the station and then headed back home. I was sure Hawks knew how I wasn't in the total mood to celebrate when I wasn't smug about our debut or rubbed it in his face, and he could also have been doing all the celebration thing because of how down I seemed about everything. I appreciate it, I do, and so much, but it wouldn't ease my worries very much except being able to help me feel a bit better. Everyone had already found out about the news about 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙖𝙧𝙮, and Mina ambushed me at door. She shook me wildly back and forth, evidently very worked up. Rins, did you know that Kirishima, Midoriya, Tsu, and Achiko had put down a big organized villain group? I heard they were Yakuza too. She asked with wide eyes and almost frantically. Yes, we saw the news at lunchtime, Tokoyami. After calming down, I put my hands on Mina's to prevent her from starting over again. Yeah, I had called Izu in the evening. Apparently Night I had passed away and Togata had lost his quirk permanently, but the girl they saved is doing fine with just a little fever. From our side, it seems that only Kirishima had severe injuries, however he will recover completely. It was still really hard to believe. The person who stood beside All Might for all those years here in Japan had died. With the word death, I keep going back to that scene that night. It made me understand the phrase, why people say death is a scary thing. What? They didn't even pick my call. Okay, maybe Kirishima was not doing good, but the others too. Pinky whined. Maybe they will if you call now. They were probably busy or something, I said with a smile. Right? I'll try. Toru exclaimed. Anyways, after all their siblings, it's understandable if Midoriya picked Rin's calls unlike ours, Ida said, pushing his glasses. Guys, they must be tired from their work study. We shouldn't pester them like this, Yamamo said with a small smile. Let's sit over there and talk. I've also prepared some tea for everyone's. I smiled brightly. That would be nice. My stomach was still full after that big tasty dinner. It'd be nice to have some of Yamamo's tea. Her tea is just amazing. Some of her teas were also better than coffee at reducing headaches and waking us up. And maybe it would also help me calm down a bit. I'll come back in a bit, I said. Me too, Tokoyami nodded too, and before we entered the elevator, I'll come too, Shoto said, coming over. Tokoyami nodded and the three of us stood in the lift in silence till it reached the first floor, where Tokoyami got off with a nod. And then it was just me and Shoto. Are you okay? You were at your work study when this happened with Midoriya? He asked finally now that we were alone. I was surprised and touched at the concern. I smiled softly for a brief moment, some of the tiredness I suppressed coming back to me. I'm fine. Well, I didn't even know Izu had gone for his work study along with the others in the morning, since I had left early with Tokoyami for Kyushu. So I didn't know what was going on, but I'm just glad that they're safe. It was bad Night I had died, and I wish I was there to help them, especially the little girl. We're all old enough to be able to understand suffering at least to an extent, but she was just a little girl. How could you even do that to an innocent kid like her? It looked like it had been happening ever since she could even retain her memories, I said, looking down while holding my costume case in front of me. It was really heartbreaking to just hear it. I could understand Izu's pain till now, and also sad that I couldn't share it. Eri was the girl they saved, right? Shoto asked, slightly turning towards me. Yeah, I looked up at him to my left. If I may ask, what did she go through? Oh right, I forgot, not everyone knows. It's only that Izu told me. I paused for a moment. They experimented on her to make quirk-canceling bullets from her BLD cells. I said while looking down, sadly pensive. He didn't respond for a while, in surprise and shock. I'm glad she was finally rescued. It makes sense why they were so tense this whole time. I silently nodded. Yeah. The elevators opened and we realized a few seconds later, after which we walked out, just standing there for a bit and not wanting to turn away to our rooms, unable to tell if it was awkward or not, looking everywhere but each other. I hesitated for a bit and turned and leaned my head against his chest and sighed very lightly. Let's stay like this just a moment, I asked. It wasn't just about that, I was also really tired from everything that happened today, especially the news of Dabi fighting too. It was scary. No matter how well I hide it, the feeling is still there for me to know, because I already saw the horrible scene of death caused by him. I had felt so happy when I had helped save the people today and saw their smiling faces and the kid asked me for an autograph, but later it also reminded me once again that in public I could do hero work, but in the shadows when it comes to the League, will I even be able to save these people the same way in the future? I think that every time I imagine how it would be like if I was in Hawk's position, if I would ever start doing something similar to him. I just can't help but wonder of such a situation, feeling like it might happen, like it's very likely to happen. I know exactly what it means to help in the investigation on Dobby's identity, however much it just seems to be normal on the outside. The worst-case scenario is also something I know. It was frustrating to think of and also had me waver in the decision I have to make before giving my answer to the HPSC. I won't be able to have peaceful times like this if I ever said yes. I could though if I chose to ignore all that. Shoto silently without a word put his arms around me as if it was natural and I felt warm in his embrace, and it nearly made me cry. There was comfort and a feeling of ease in me as I was in his hot and cold arms. I closed my eyes and relaxed in the scent of his clothes and the feeling of the hug while wrapping my arms around his torso. My tiredness washed away in the happiness. It was hard to seek comfort. I didn't really have an idea where to turn until my body automatically moved. He didn't ask me anything despite my strange mood and behavior, and I wished I could stay like this forever until the distant ding of the elevator sounded as it stopped in the floor below us, breaking the silent moment and probably dropping someone off beneath our floor. I came back to reality in an almost daze. I suddenly blushed with wide eyes as I was still in his arms, realizing what I had done without any permission. I kissed him before too on the cheek when he was jealous, but somehow this felt almost wrong. We weren't even dating yet, right? I don't even know what is right. Never mind, it's just a hug. No need to get too flustered and make this more awkward. It was normal till now. I couldn't help but think of that time when I almost did hug him in the training camp. Who'd have thought I'd really get to do it? I straightened up and he opened his arms to let me free. His expression showed that he thought he needed to comfort me since I was down. Are you feeling okay now? He asked, tilting his head to the side slightly and his eyes averted casually while speaking. I used to find when I was a kid that my mom hugging me back like this made me feel better for a while and forget everything. You seemed like you needed one too. He was wearing a white shirt with a blue denim open shirt that I always found suited him very much, and the same goes for his turtlenecks and other clothes, his style in general, and it could only make me more flustered. His concerned gaze made me blush even more as my heart pounded and I turned around instantly to hide my face and confused eyes with my hair. Thanks for the hug. I feel very much better, actually, worked like a peach. Well, I have to go change before going down, so good night. I said and went out of the elevator, going straight to my room. Good night. When we were gonna go down anyways. I wanted to slap my forehead. I had left him standing in the same place puzzled as he looked down at his hands. He put his hands in his pockets thinking that probably my strange behavior was because we weren't dating yet and that he had to really catch up to everyone and me. He felt sad about it for a moment. Then he recalled how I gave him a kiss previously to console him after the provisional licensing lessons. When at that time when I leaned on him, should he have really just hugged me back or kissed me like I did, or was he wrong about it too? He didn't really know how to comfort me or whether it exactly worked or not. He had no idea how this whole thing worked, and there were more than one times when he was freakishly insecure because he was afraid he would just break it with his own hands. A major part of him asking me to wait also included wanting to figure out this whole dating and love thing before rushing into it because he was afraid of what could happen. When he gave the provisional licensing exam reason for this, he had to actually rack his brain real fast to come up with it as a part of the reason. Naturally, the only kind of love he saw was his parents, and he knows it can't be love. He wanted to really do things right and not mess it up with me. But at the same time, it was also the major reason he felt guilty for making me wait and that I didn't even know about it yet. He didn't even know how much he was overthinking it on the latter part. About earlier, whatever's happened has happened, probably it was better he hugged me back. Since I looked really sad and tired at that moment, he couldn't help it. Though he had small smile, slightly happy and relieved that maybe he was reliable enough for me to turn to him. Because it was always him that relied on me, and it was a bit of a relief in a sense that he wasn't only depending on me and asking too much of me every time. The scene of me suddenly leaning on his chest made him a bit flustered too, and his heart skipped a beat just like it did all those times he was with me before. Both of us unknowingly had several insecurities about our relationship, and some the exact same kind while also different at the same time, while overthinking some things too. But we're learning, slowly but surely, and there's never nothing left to learn in a relationship. Even when you're old and wrinkly, there's something to learn. I entered my room unaware about all of these thoughts of his nor our situation, but incredibly flustered myself. I had never reacted this much before. My heart was already pounding really hard, and I had my hand over the lower half of my face while leaning against the door of my room. I put my hand down after a bit. I had forgotten everything at that moment, all of my worries and troubles in that hug like he'd intended apparently. It made me happy and I smiled. It was nice to have that feeling even if for just a moment. I felt like I had someone to lean on. It was different than how I trust Izu or my friends. I changed fairly fast and went down. It was actually already really late, but I said I'd come down to chat some more and also for Yamamo's tea. We talked some time and had the delicious tea, though I didn't really know its name. The next day at night, I sat at one of the tables while trying to comfort myself with Koda's cute and bunny and petting it. Its fur was so soft and cuddly that it almost brought a smile to my face. Izu and the others got held back for more paperwork after healing, and their return ended up postponing to tonight. So we were waiting for them. The moment the door opened, I turned around, got up from the chair immediately. "It couldn't be anyone but them, you're back," I said brightly and ran to Izu with the others also following quickly behind me. I hugged him tightly. I was after all still gonna be worried till I saw him. He hugged me back after the initial startle. "Those guys are back," Grapes said again. "We were all worried about you." Yamamo I stood back a bit from the hug. "Yeah?" I said, extremely glad that they were finally back. "I'm so glad you guys are all back." Yeah. "We saw the news. Looked like you had a tough time. Are you okay?" "You troublesome kids. Anyways, have some chocolate cake," Sato said, holding up a chocolate cake. "With Kamino and this time, you guys keep getting involved with some crazy stuff. It's scary, you know." "Yeah, especially you, Izu," I said with an accusatory stare and my arms folded. "Sorry," he said with an awkward smile. I simply smiled and then I went to hug Tsu and Yura with Toru, who chirped, "Achiko, Tsu. I'm glad you're okay." "Yeah, I agreed too." The two mumbled out from the extremely stuffy hug. "Hanks, Yura, ribbit." Sui broke off from the hug and saw Shoto going outside while looking at his phone. The unpleasant expression on his face made me wonder who it was on the call. Though I couldn't help but internally pout once again at how unfair it was that he looked good in everything and for my health the way the sweater hugged his figure, and how anything blue went so well with his candy cane hair. Things I never avidly noticed before are just flying to me right now without asking, and I don't know how to deal with such foreign feelings that would have otherwise made me think that I was feeling sick. Damn it, I was thinking too much, I got distracted. Meanwhile, Ida tried to be the police tape for the four, trying to keep everyone away since they must be very fragile right now after everything they've gone through. Yes, but I didn't think that they needed to have a gloomy atmosphere around them. They had already been settling everything for 2 days in their minds, and though they do need some time alone, a bit of liveliness would be good too to remind them that everything isn't completely hopeless. But if they do need some time alone, that wouldn't be something we would deny either since each person copes in a different way. Izu reassured Ida that it was fine with the same thought, however that backfired as Ida adjusted his glasses, obviously waiting for this. I smiled awkwardly and sympathetically towards Izu as he said, "Then if I may." He immediately shook Izu violently just like Pinky did yesterday to me. Why were we twins too at being prone to that treatment? I was extremely worried about you guys. Geez, you guys. You're being the most violent. Ciro, I'll make some lavender herb tea. It'll help ease your spirits," Yamamo said, running away. Sato stuffed the cake in Izu's mouth. "Have some chocolate cake?" I looked around at the others and found Yura looking sadly at the scene. I had no idea what happened on her side, and I couldn't really ask what happened, but, "Yura, are you okay?" I asked worriedly. "If you need to talk about anything, we're all ready to listen." My expression wholeheartedly meant what I said. Tsu was looking at Yura sadly. Something serious did happen on her side. She looked at her hands for some time. contemplating and then said, "I want to save people." I just simply listened to what she said without saying anything. "Why didn't you tell us about what was going on? We were super surprised too." Shiro asked, putting an arm over Kirishima's shoulder. "Sorry, there was a GG order. Kirishima, you okay?" Mina asked, stepping forward while holding the bunny and tilting her head. "I'm not there yet." Kirishima replied with a small smile. It sounded like there was not everything to the sentence and probably something only Pinky would understand if anyone. "I see," she said, looking down with a poker expression as Yura stepped forward with a grin. "Oh, that's so cute. We borrowed it from Koda. Tsu, you want to try holding it?" Mina said, and Tsu agreed with a ribbit, and Toru asked to go next. They all had the sadness lingering in their hearts, but it was all the experience that comes with the work studies that Togata talked about. They all probably consider it as a lesson over which they can grow. It was not a bad thing. I smiled endearingly. I lowered my head with the same smile and eyes closed. Well, talking might help, but not everyone can talk about everything. "Hey Kaken. What are you sulking for? You're here cause you were worried, right? Be more honest with yourself." Kaminari teased with a grin and a hand on Katsuki's shoulder, who shrugged it off and stood up, making him fall sideways on the couch. "I'm going to sleep," he said, walking away with his hand in his pockets. "Isn't it too early? You old or something?" "Kaminari, unlike the rest of you, I've got stuff to do," he grumbled out. The door opened and Shoto entered. "Midoriya, Yuruka, Kirishima, Azui, sorry, but I'm going too." "Isn't it too early? You old or something?" Kaminari repeated again. "I understand, Bakugo, but even Todoroki. What's going on?" Tsu asked. It was due to their provisional license training. Jiraiya said the same thing, and it was still pretty early and I had to agree on that. I ended up walking the two till the lift as I asked Shoto, "Did something happen? You seemed a bit unpleasant earlier when you got the call on your phone. You noticed it was my father. He said he will be coming to see the training tomorrow. Apparently it has been really long since he saw me," Shoto replied. There was clear sarcasm and displeasure in the tone of his voice and expression. Katsuki was walking in front of us, trying not to listen to the conversation but not being able to help it since we were heading in the same direction. "But not long enough for you," I stated with a laughing smile. He nodded, his lips inevitably and almost unnoticeably curved. "Well, just do whatever you want, right?" I said with a grin. "Just ignore that old do man. Shoto has come a long way, though sometimes his father still pesters him in spirit, like during the provisional license exam. Endeavor might still loom over him as a shadow from time to time, but he just has to learn to get used to it if he didn't want it to hinder him on his path to being a hero. Someday, he would have to forgive his father, not because he deserves it, but for his own peace of mind. Although it would be really long before it happens, all this progress meant that Shoto was already on that path, whether he knew it himself, or whether he hated it or not. I will still be with him to help him along the way." "You were about to say dog, right?" he stated, though he wasn't offended in the slightest. He was just curious. I tensed with the smile on my face and wide eyes. "Nope, I didn't say anything like that. I only said old man," I said, looking to the other side with my hands behind my back and a clearly guilty expression on my face. Behind me, Shoto smiled in response. Both of us didn't know, but Katsuki, who was standing in front of us, thought, "You definitely were gonna say that old dog." I left them at the elevator with a wave, and Katsuki still grumbling and a lot angrier than before, clearly having felt like the third wheel but unwilling to admit it to make things worse. I giggled to myself softly and turned to go back to the others and Izu. The next day, when the two came back from their provisional license training, I noticed Shoto seemed happy. It was almost weird and new since he had just come back from meeting his father. I was sitting at the dining tables doing random note-making when they entered. "Hey Firespit, you should have been there during the training today," Katsuki said as soon as he entered. I looked back, highly puzzled. First, Katsuki wasn't one to strike up a casual conversation like this. Second, what did he mean by "I should have been there"? It definitely made me curious. Both of them were being weird. That wasn't even me. "And I still don't get why it's funny," Shoto deadpanned. Katsuki held his stomach with one hand and had a laughing expression. "What? But it was your face, and you won't get it till you saw it yourself." "Oh yes, you didn't see yourself either," Shoto replied with no mockery in his tone at all, but even so Katsuki took offense. Confusion mixed with my curiosity, while trying to not laugh even though I didn't understand a thing of what was going on. What happened? At the moment Katsuki was more focused on shouting at Shoto, who had his face turned to the side and away from Katsuki's barking with a poker face. It was 𝙎𝙪𝙢𝙢𝙧𝙮 illusion. She made a weird one of me to show the kids. Apparently Bakugo found it funny. Shoto said to me. I was completely clueless at this point as my mind ran around in circles trying to figure it out. Kids. Weird illusion. Why me? And it was funny. And Katsuki's own one. A little later, I ended up waiting outside Shoto's room, leaning against a wall and waiting for him to get changed into more comfy clothes, till he came out and told his story, cause now I was burning with curiosity. Shoto opened his door wearing a plain white shirt. So what happened? You really caught my attention with all those half and half answers, I joked with a smile, standing up and partially coming into his room though not knowing where to sit, and ended up standing by myself near the entrance as he put his bags away. And you also seem to be in a better mood than I thought you would be after returning. Did Endeavor not end up coming? No, he came, Shoto said with a distasteful look on his face, but he did say something after everything ended. Maybe I should start with what happened first. Wait, let's go outside to the roof. We could also freely talk there, and this seems like it might take some time. It was a wish on a guilty pleasure. Okay, he said, nodding, looking down at me with a smile. One look at that was enough, because his smiles could always manifest into an imaginary sword only visible by me and kill me at any instant. I went to the balcony doors that were also Japanese styled and opened it. We could go through here if you don't mind. I looked back at him. I don't know, but I was just doing what I wanted to at that moment, despite knowing that spending time with Shoto like this could be deadly. My clothes aren't fireproof. Oh well, no problem. I turned to face him completely and held my hands out for him to take. The back of them faced up. He walked forward and took them without question. It was something simple, but my heart still pounded at that moment. We flew up and back with the flames under our outstretched arms and on his legs below his knees without touching his shoes since he was wearing shorts. He'd bent his knees to a 90-degree at my direction for easy lift. Other than that, it was mostly me carrying us both up in the dark. We landed on the roof and sat down. Can I borrow your flames? Mine are like a lighthouse signal in the dark. I rubbed the back of my neck. He nodded and produced his familiar orange flames on that palm of his hand, and I controlled them, making them colorless but warm enough to provide heat in the cold night air. We had sat down leaning against the railing with the transparent flames keeping us warm, all my prep done. Why did you want to speak here though? We could have talked in my room too. Well, dunno, I guess I just wanted to for quite some time, and I guess I've started to like high places recently. We can go back down if you're uncomfortable. You should have said so. I was just curious. We can come here whenever you want, he said sweetly. I looked down, nodding, trying to hide the blush in the dark. So, how was your day? We were sitting quite close beside each other with our legs spread in front, and were still holding hands. We never released them. I was conscious, but at that same time I wanted to lean my head on his shoulder. I have to hold myself back. We're already holding hands. Don't dash. Oh. Yes, Utsushima had also joined the training, and now there are 11 people. Gang Orca had come and gave us a punishment trial. Me, Bakugo, Yurashi, and her were assigned to win the hearts of some troublesome children. They were being really difficult in the start, but they're all very smart kids. Though they kept calling my first aid capsules wieners. He was completely unfazed as he said this, and I couldn't help but have a frozen smile, trying to pretend it was totally normal too. I have a feeling they had to deal with many kotas, though why wieners? That's a pretty vague order. It must have been hard to deal with all of those kids. Especially since it was you three. I don't know about the girl, but it must have been hard for the 3 boys to handle considering their personalities. I wonder how this real Utsushima is. Why do I have an ominous feeling? No, it isn't that exactly, just some kind of uneasiness. But no, I can't be, but no, just don't think about it. There's no way. That's just too petty. It's not the Utsushima or Toga that Aizu encountered. This is a totally different person. Is this how Yura felt that time? No, wait, I'm not supposed to be thinking about it. I focused on listening to him. Yeah, it failed a few times. I tried introducing myself and getting them to know me, but it failed miserably, so we went with Bakugo's plan. Shoto said with a dejected